Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and it's not my fault the script isn't finished. I got this lackadaisical nature from my mom. I should get credit just for trying to work on the script. Sure, it's a half-ass effort, but everything is so much harder for me because reasons.
And I'm Scott Daly, and you're a good person, Matt.
Thank you for being fair to me.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of phenomenal cosmic powers, total pieces of shit, part 1 of 2, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week on the show, we are continuing our coverage of Arc 16 with chapters 1611, 1612, and 16Y. First, Victoria and friends invade Shardland, which is basically just being forced to watch all your worst home movies over and over again while Lovecraftian horrors try to stab you with their hair. Vicky freaks out and punches a rock real hard until Teacher gets mad. Then, finally, it's part 1 of the long-awaited Amy interlude. And, well, she sucks. What the fuck were we even expecting at this point? Matt, what did you think of these 2 chapters?
Yeah, This is a wild ride, and you know, just to say it out loud, it's a bit unfortunate we didn't get to hit 12.y and 12.z in the same chapter, but if we had, or in the same episode, but if we had done that today, that would be 4 chapters in 1 episode, and really I think it's better for us to move it around so that we're doing 3 chapters today, 3 chapters next week, and give everything the time it deserves.
Yeah, that's correct. So 16.z will be next week, along with presumably the first 2 chapters of Arc 17. That's the way we're doing it.
That sounds right to me, but
it's a little weird, but yeah.
As far as these chapters go, man, Wildbow's given us a lot to chew on. I mean, these 2 Victoria chapters are just this kaleidoscopic roller coaster of symbols and imagery and things that we could just endlessly interpret and think about and talk about. And then, of course, Amy's interlude is just this masterclass in diving into the psychology of someone who you just don't want to dive into the psychology of. Yeah,
I mean, I think it would be one thing if, like, we could just skim through 11 and 12 real quick and then spend the entire time focusing on 2 Amy interludes. But we can't. Right. So like these 2 chapters there's still so much going on about these chapters. I mean, it's the conclusion of the arc from our protagonist's perspective. So we can't just skim over this stuff. There's too much here. It's frustrating, but I mean, it's like there's just, I love having this much to discuss, right? Like,
right.
It's an embarrassment of riches, really.
Yeah, it's like if somebody brings you your dinner and there's just like 3 large ribeyes, and you're just like, "Wow, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, I'm going to do my best, but this is too much, actually." So yeah. That's where we are.
So that's us. We're here we go. Let's chomp in.
Tuck it in. All right, let's get into it. I guess the fan art contest is basically over now. Is that,
if you are listening to this, it is over. If you are listening to this recording live, you have like 4 hours to go.
Yeah, so good luck with that. All right, let's get into these chapters.
We are going to be the vote will be up to our patrons soon for that, for the fan art contest. So we've got to compile all those, make the post, the vote will be up, and we might be able to announce the winner by this time next week. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, watch this space. All right, 16.11.
Yes, let's do it.
We begin with Damsel. Damsel uses her knowledge of the crystal landscape to heal and restore from save all the members of Breakthrough, including Byron, who is understandably confused. Victoria gradually becomes upset by the implications of all this stuff that's happening, and Tattletale explains that they're operating more like a subroutine that's moving through the file system. They're not actually here.
it's it's just perfect to me that Victoria's reaction to all this existential horror stuff is like, this is terrifying, and I don't know what to do with any of this. Because like I think that she out of everyone was always the person that didn't really get the multidimensional stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like she's always been kind of like, wait, what is no, my head? So it makes sense here that like she's dealing with this, and of course she's the type of person that like the idea of existence and identity are these things that are so important to her that it being a loose kind of concept in this world is something that's difficult to process.
That's true. She already has issues with like being a copy or a duplicate or whatever. And here she basically is some hologram or whatever made out of Victoria records. Right. I mean, it really is quite horrifying when you think about it.
It is.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite thing is Byron's reaction to this whole thing. And if you just take a minute to like put yourself in Byron's shoes, what this whole experience would be like, it's got to be crazy. Like, as far as we understand, he hasn't really been conscious since the whole teacher fight, right? Like, I'm not sure what it looks like when he's phased out, when he's in a coma. Like, we have no idea, but let's just assume he's not been really awake, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're thrust into this world. You're awake. You have no idea what's going on. You're staring at your brother. He's standing in front of you for the first time in years. And everyone's just like, "Oh, cool! We got everyone here now. Let's go on with our goal." And you're like, "Wait, what? What?
Yeah.
Who?"
And by the way, our mission is to break reality.
Yeah.
Come on, keep up.
Oh yeah, and as soon as we finish with this whole thing, you're gonna go back to being in that coma. So don't get used to being awake again, because nah.
Yeah, this is all character building for Byron. It's great. Yeah, no, I'm glad we pulled that out, because I mean, it's great. It's funny. It's also terrifying, and just imagine, like, yeah. Wildbow gives us a minute with Byron to make sure we realize how ridiculous his situation is.
Yeah, but don't worry, Vista's visiting him, so it's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Love it.
So apparently, when they're in the shard computer, Sveta has access to all of her stolen memories, more or less, she says.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this for a bit. I think we need to spend some time on this, because there's pretty big, like, inadvertent revelation that comes from here, right?
Yeah.
And I think this kind of ties back to a few weeks ago when you and I were both kind of very confused about Sveta's mall trigger vision, right? Something wasn't adding up there. Or, as I thought at the time, we just were bad at reading and we got confused. But that wasn't it, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at it, there's this guy, Dimmy, and his sister, Nayette. And I'm not pronouncing that correctly, probably. But... and it's pretty clear from the mall vision that the one that falls is our point of view character, right?
Yep.
But it's also very clear that our point of view character is not Nayette. And that's confusing, because we knew that Sveta was her when we saw her in the interlude before, right? Right?
Well, we thought we did, Scott.
We thought we did, yeah. So, I mean, this is our big revelation, right? That actually Sveta is a trans woman, and this metaphor that Sveta has been for living with this has kind of become literal, right? Yeah. It's become literal, and I think that's very interesting. And I want to talk to you about that for a bit, because if we go back, and I'm sure everyone's done it. I did it. I went back and read the Sveta interludes, or what we thought were the Sveta interludes. Which chapter? I don't even remember what arc that was anymore.
I'm not sure either.
We went back and read those, and it's clear that those actually aren't from Sveta's point of view as we thought they were. Then you go back and read the trigger vision back earlier in this arc, and that becomes obvious, and everything kind of just slots into place, and it's very interesting. And I want to talk to you about this. I love it. I love it. It's an interesting, fun idea, and I love this idea that Wildbow has kind of been doing throughout these stories, is taking this thing that is to us so clearly a metaphor, right? Like, Sveta to me was so clearly a metaphor for the trans experience, and he's now taken that and made it. No, it's not a metaphor anymore. This is literal. This is what Sveta was going through. This is why this was so important to her, and this is why feels so content in this body she has now. But that's an interesting choice to do that, right? To take that, to remove that from the metaphor and take it to the literal.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go into, right? Because like once that all kind of clicked together for me, I was like, okay, well then other things began to make sense, like why she has this tentacle body. It's a manifestation of her extreme discomfort with the body she was born with. It was almost like her power was like, oh, you don't like your body?
Yeah.
Here, I help.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And gave her a tentacle body, and like that. So that's all stuff where it's like, wow, that works even better. It, like, and it connects more pieces together. Before we move on from something you just mentioned, like the idea that the interlude, I'm still a little bit up in the air as to whether that is an interlude from Nyet's perspective and we're just watching Demi, or whether that is just an interlude from a floaty pseudo third person perspective, because there's actually very little in that chapter. There's not zero, but there's very little that actually anchors you to Nyet's point of view. So it could just be that Wildbow was playing a trick on us the whole time. I'm not 100% sure of that, because there is some evidence that it's Nyet's point of view, but it's not certain.
Yeah, I agree. And that's that leads me into the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. This, the next question we ask every time we see anything in stories is why? Why do it this way, right? Because there is a version of the story where you just have Sveta aware from the beginning, and you just have the readers aware of Sveta from the beginning, aware that she's a trans woman, and that's just who she is, and we all know that, and there's no mystery to be discovered here. But that's not the way the story went, and I think it's fun to kind of look at, well, why did we do it this way? Why did we kind of hide this for a while and then slowly reveal it to us? Why did we do what you're guessing might be a point of view fake out, or just like a floaty point of view that we haven't seen before, that seems to go against the rules of the interludes as we know them. Right. Why do this? And I think you had an interesting thought about this that I kind of wanted to explore, because I really like your opinion on it.
Okay.
You gonna give it?
What was my opinion? Did I have an opinion?
I think you said something to the effect of, and you're right, this was a week ago. I should have written this down. But I think your idea around this was basically the idea that because Sveta isn't aware of this, or was not fully cognizant of who she is, that masking it from us and masking it from her allows us to be along the ride with her and discover this with her and discover this part of her with her, which is very important to her journey as a human being in understanding who she is and where she's going and her future in general.
Yeah. So that is, I remember saying that now. Yeah, absolutely. So like if we had known this and Sveta didn't, that would be a different experience, right? Sure. You would think of Sveta a certain way throughout this whole process, whereas as it is now, we think of Sveta the way Sveta thinks of herself. We see her the way she sees herself. Yeah. And so we learn this information when she learns this information, and we feel basically the same way about it that she does. And that's absolutely the power of choosing to frame it this way from a writing perspective. And that was the thing that kind of clicked for me and made me think, okay, well, if there was one reason, there's probably more than one reason why I was always doing multiple things at once. But if there was one reason, I think it has something to do with your state of understanding and your sort of your sort of understanding about the situation and it evolving with the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool.
I like that a lot. I mean, it's a really fascinating new understanding of our character. I think you're absolutely right that it allows us to understand who she is and so many different facets about who she is and what she's gone through on such a greater level. I'm glad we got here, and I'm glad we get to now explore what this revelation is going to do for this character, where she's going to go from here. If it's, I don't really think it's going to change anything in her dramatically, right? I think it's to me, it's her reaction to it might be like our reaction to it, which is okay, I understand something a little bit more about myself now. Mm-hmm. And maybe that equips me to better handle the difficulties that are going to approach me in the future, right? I think it's fascinating. I love it. I love that. Once again, we've talked about these books being inclusive, and I think it's cool that we have one of our main central characters is this wonderful, powerful trans woman that is a kind of a fan favorite amongst the readers. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, right. And I look forward to seeing, like you hinted at there, where her character goes from here. How she processes it, how she integrates this new knowledge about her past into who she is.
Yeah.
Because like learning it is an interesting twist for us, but we still haven't actually seen what that information, how she's going to integrate that information. Yeah,
sure.
So.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So that's Sveta.
Yep.
That's great. It was a surprise. I did not see that coming. I was kind of happy when I saw it, not just because it's an exciting revelation for the character, but I was like, oh, Matt and I aren't bad at reading. It's just...
Yeah.
That it all makes sense now. That's why we were confused.
Yeah, right. Because that was the one time where I was like, wow, I've never fucked up my interpretation of what was happening in the scene so badly, but it turns out it was not 100% obvious.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was great.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on from that, I wanted to talk to you about this one part where Victoria is like trying to read the crystals and understand what facets are pulling from what and what the pattern is. And she keeps noticing a pattern here, but then there's like one or two instances that don't seem to fit in the pattern as she understands it. And the writing here is really good, where she says, was the connective tissue between those things something to do with youth or my past? With that sparring and bloody nose outliers being a moment I'd already forgotten, where I reminisced about being young or studying? Was it a kind of education instead? Each thing connected by a theme of me learning things about myself. In that case, the photos and videos were a kind of study of my past self. The sparring exercise and bloody nose, something tangential to that, coming to terms. My life, facets of me, arranged by someone else's sorting system. And I find this really interesting from the perspective of like, you and me. So we've talked about the idea of Worm and Ward as like a metatextual commentary on the existence of story, right? I think J Maniac has been involved in creating those videos, and every time we bring this up, we have to reference his videos because they did such a fabulous job of outlining this. But this idea that these books can be viewed as an examination of what story is. And in that vein, the shard space and the crystal facets are kind of like a representation of analysis, aren't they? Story analysis, taking events from the long past, events from the recent past, events from current, and attempting to construct an idea of who a character is based on that stuff. And that's what we do. That's what you and I do all the time. And things don't always line up, right? Like there's something that doesn't quite fit our pattern, but kind of fits it, and we kind of sometimes try to shove it in there.
Yeah.
It also made me think, like, what would the character react to our analysis, right? Like, if Victoria was reading what we wrote about her or what we said about her, would she feel the same way? Would she be like, "Huh, this is interesting because like this is kind of me, but this thing doesn't make sense." Like, would that same reaction happen? I don't know. I think it's just fascinating from a metatextual perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm glad you said that, and then I from there say the crystal shard world is the subreddit. and every the sections they move between that serve different functions are all different threads where someone has posted and said, "This is my interpretation of what's going on here," and then other people comment and add their notes on that particular facet of the story, and then. So as they stumble through this landscape, they're seeing a bunch of different lenses, refracting one particular element of the story, of what's happening in, the real world, which is the story, the text rather than the metatext.
Yeah.
I'm in love with this interpretation now.
It's really great, isn't it? I really like it.
Yeah, I'm wondering how far we can push it as we go.
Oh, let's just do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's just push it as far as we can go.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah. So I just love this bit where she sees herself wishing, blowing out her birthday candle, and the text says, "I wish I was a superhero. I knew the wish because I'd made the same one every year."
Oh my God. It's like,
Great.
it's so great. And like, we have to talk about like from a high level perspective what these chapters are doing, right? Because we're basically taking our characters and we're throwing them in. I joked at the beginning about like they're watching all their worst home movies, and that's kind of what it is. It's like here you're going through this terrible stuff, and here's everything that you've ever experienced thrown back at you, but from like the least, maybe not the least charitable, but from some very uncharitable angles, right? We're going to show you, and again throughout the shard space, that's what's happening. We're going to show you, here's this moment, and it's going to be not designed, but just so happens to show a moment that doesn't make you feel good about yourself, or here's this, and the shard space is just throwing these things at these characters. It's kind of like, if we look at it as like a path on the way to recovery is having to dive deep into your trauma and really look at it straight on. It's going to throw the worst moments of your life back at you. Like you can kind of see this as like a last desperate attempt towards recovery of like pushing, of forcing you to backslide or forcing you to see these things and like make them part of you, make these facets a part of you.
Right. I mean, we don't know exactly the nature of this place, but we can assume that this is essentially the machine that kind of made them, that kind of either gave them or took advantage of their trauma in the first place. And it's what gives them their powers, right? It's like it's stitched deeply into all of the stuff that they're struggling with. It knows all of their buttons to push. And we see throughout these chapters that it's pretty good at pushing those buttons too. And what's funny is that it's not even trying to. It's just, that's what it's made of.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That you know, there's nothing from based on understanding. There's nothing here that is like planning to do this, right? It is not. It is not choosing to show what when. It is just the normal operation of this supercomputer. Just happens to be doing that. And of course, you know, we have a supercomputer above this supercomputer, which is our author, that is choosing to show these images, right? So we can still analyze what is being shown to our characters when as a part of, you know, thematic resonance of what they're going through. But yeah, from the textual level, this is all just regular operating procedures.
Right. I mean, it's also interesting to consider the metaphor of the crystal land as Wildbow's brain, but
sure. I mean, heck, let's do it. Let's.
Yeah. I mean, it's a place where as they move through it, it invokes different facets of their existence as he has contrived it to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's kind of one I like. Once again, I mean, I have to give props to this way that he's used the science fiction grounding of things to really make the metaphor work better, at least for me. Like that's what I think is fun about it, is he doesn't spend much time explaining it, but he does explain, like, okay, this is basically just a big computer. You're not actually walking on the surface of it. You're more like a program that's moving through it. And as you move through the different subsystems of this big mainframe, you're activating different, you know, memory stores of, and the different memory stores are organized by, well, that's what we're trying to figure out, right? They're organized by different sort of ideas.
Sure.
And that's why they're seeing them, right? It's not, it makes sense. It's not just like, oh, it's crazy. They're wandering around. There's crystals, and the crystals show them images. Isn't that weird? It's like, no, it's the science fiction nature of why this place exists and why it's set up this way. And I think that's awesome.
And I get that, and I definitely like that for you. I don't need that as much. Like, I don't need the science fiction rationale. I'm fine with the abstract nothingness of this place and like it's just gonna show random fucking crazy things and crazy shit going on, and it's cosmic horror to a point we've never seen. But I agree that there's a lot of people that look towards that, and I agree that is one of the strengths of Wildbow's writing, is that he likes to take these very abstract, high level concepts and really, you know, examine them and drill down into them until he finds a reason for it, a firm reason and rules around it, and that does help, I think, construct the world better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fundamental to how he approaches things, honestly, across different stories too, because like it's pretty easy to just sit down and just try to write something creepy and Lovecraftian. Like it's really not that hard just like you kind of know what tone you're going for. You know what kinds of buttons you can push in the human psyche.
Sure.
That's not the hard part. The hard part is doing it in a way where it feels like it's built into your universe and you haven't like broken the consistency of your world by incorporating it into your story. And that's what he's managed to do here.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in this instance, this is the one place where he could get away with just doing what, I mean, they're in this mystical shard land where what are the rules? This is not Earth as we know it. This is not existence as we know it. So this is the one place where he really didn't have to do that, I think, or at least could have gotten away with not doing that. But his commitment to it certainly is commendable.
Yeah, I agree that he could have gotten away with it. Yeah. So yeah, speaking of kind of the nature of this place, Damsel explains the trick behind navigating. The trick is that there is no trick. All of these versions of ourselves, hurt, crying, laughing, young, present day, costumed, they exist simultaneously. You choose the face you want to present. Themes.
Themes.
Yeah. Victoria later introspects about this a bit, and she considers that she doesn't really feel like she's quite herself, or maybe not her whole self. And like she thinks back to the fact that she doesn't really feel anything about the fact that they've murdered Cradle, for example.
Yeah, and this I think this is really important because it ties back to the conversation that Victoria had with Rain way back in Arc 12 while spying on Cradle's base. This idea that, look, you're going to feel good when bad things happen to bad people. That's normal. You shouldn't worry about that. The problem is you should feel a little bad too. You should feel a little bad about the thing you're having to do. That was Victoria's whole thing. And when you stop feeling shitty or you get used to it, that's what you need to start watching out for. And I think this is a specific callback to that, because I think what we're seeing here is that all she feels is kind of relieved and good about it. She's not feeling the shitty part. So this is maybe a callback to a moment of, hey, Victoria, you need to start watching out for your behavior here. And I mean, I don't know. Do you think she's cognizant of that? I mean, she's acknowledging it. She's saying, I don't quite feel like myself, but I don't know if it's halting or changing her behavior.
I don't know. I feel like for the last several arcs, she's been, what is it? Over her skids. I'm not sure what the right expression is, but like, just because she notices these things, I've sort of lost my trust that means she's going to sit back and fix that problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think by the end of the next chapter, we're going to see that, like, I mean, that the end of chapter 12 is her like just charging forward recklessly into nothing she understands.
Yeah.
And not hesitating at all.
Right. I mean,
so
there's
you're right.
In the next chapter, there's all this like dark, anxious, panicky emotion that she doesn't understand, and she's not really able to get a handle on it at any point. We'll talk about that when we get there, though.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you pulled that Rain conversation out, because I'd sort of forgotten about that, and that definitely plugs in really nicely here. But yeah, so they eventually guess that the staccato lightning that occasionally jumps away from them and off through the crystal into the distance might indicate a connection between them and their agent, or the program that manifests their agent, or whatever. Ashley's agent is actually within sight, and it's a big burning torch in the distance, tall and ladder-like.
Hey, you want to read into that image? I think we should.
You gotta keep climbing. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like the whole thing was ascension, right? Like,
yeah.
Like she wanted to ascend, so her agent literally being a thing that allows you to ascend and climb.
Allows you to climb, but like, I mean, I can't escape the image of like you have to keep climbing because it's burning behind you. Like yes, it allows you to climb, but it kind of forces you to climb. It kind of doesn't let you stop climbing.
Sure.
And if you stop climbing, then you'll fall.
And a ladder on fire is a perfect Ashley image. I actually think that's perfect.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That.
Yeah, and which is funny because he doesn't say it's literally a ladder. It's just ladder-like, which gives you a certain mental image. But that's enough for us to work with. Yeah.
Yep.
So they pass through a certain region of the crystal that shows them their past or their origins, perhaps. Chicken sees his mom. Tattletale sees her trigger. Capricorn sees old teammates. Sveta, her village, and the K-63s. Kinsey, a chat room, interestingly. There's all kinds of things in here where I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, we could spend an hour on this.
It's just a throwaway thing. And then Victoria gets a shot of Dean. who is usually blotted out with black distortion, revealing that he got his powers from a vial.
Yeah, wow. So this is the bomb under the table that we were waiting to go off for a while, right? We knew Dean was a cauldron cape. We knew Victoria did not know Dean was a cauldron cape, and we were kind of waiting for this to happen because it was maybe going to be one of the things that shocks him off that pedestal she's put him on. And this is like the worst possible time for that to happen, which is classic Wildbow.
Right, because she's about to lose all of her faith in everybody, and this is one of the major... this is her pillar of, at least there was one person who never let me down.
Yep.
And that's basically been cut out from under her.
The first big old domino, right?
Yeah.
And later in the chapter, she'll say, why did the list of people I could absolutely trust or look on with fondness seem to grow so short, especially when those people went and died on me? I mean, it's like, I love how there's not any... She's like, I totally understand why he'd be in Cauldron. I get that. I'm just mad that he didn't tell me about it.
Yeah. And then he lied. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, it's understandable that she'd be hurt, right?
Sure.
It's also like, I don't know. That's a whole complicated thing.
I like the implication that he had to make up a trigger event.
Right.
And therefore, like, that's like almost the worst betrayal he could have done there, because he made up a trauma and told it to her. And that's like, and I get this idea that like, you're kind of like a poser, right? Like you're in a group of people who have gone through some of the worst trauma ever, and you make up your own story. I watched a movie at the festival I was at the last weekend where this guy was, joining a support group for people who like had something messed up happen to their face. And he like taped his face and then hid it behind cloth to make his face look messed up so he could be in the group. And it was this like horrible betrayal of the confidence and the care of all these people. And that's kind of a similar thing if you're making up a trigger event and saying, here's this really, really bad thing that happened to me. That's why I'm in your club now. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
it's interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, so I like that it's not just it's not the fact of the lie, it's the possibility of the lie, which makes it even worse somehow, because she doesn't think, he definitely made up his trigger event. She thinks something like, now I couldn't even know if that had really happened, because it's possible that the story he told really happened. Right. That just wasn't his trigger event.
Yeah, and I think there's something.
Yeah,
I think something we see from Cauldron Capes in general is just because they didn't have a trigger event in the traditional sense doesn't mean that they didn't have a life filled with trauma, right? She is jumping to a lot of conclusions here,
right?
And the thing that surprised me is like she immediately goes to it, right?
Yeah.
Like she sees Dean, and before we've even realized what the kind of graying out shadowiness means, she's already caught up to it and is like, how come you didn't tell me? It's happened so fast.
Yeah, right. The text basically doesn't actually tell us what she saw. She just kind of knows it. Mm-hmm. That almost makes me wonder if it's meant to just be like, this is just the abstract knowledge of this fact beaming into Victoria's brain. It doesn't really matter what she sees.
Yeah, I mean, we have to. Every one of these images is based on an interpretation and understanding, and we'll get into that even more when it starts literally being images that are created by Tattletale's shard. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a certain extent to where this is a reflection of how we view something, not necessarily a reflection of it as absolute fact. Yeah,
but just to close off that thought, like he's gone. She'll never get closure on this. She'll never know if he was communicating some earnest, painful thing that happened to him or just completely bullshitting. And that's like worse than if she did know that he was bullshitting.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what death really serves as, is a lack of connection, a lack of being able to get that kind of closure. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we move on from this, there is something that really jumped out at me, because there's so much going on in the detail of all these visions that are happening to the point where we can't point them all out. But I did want to point out the ones that really struck me as very, very interesting, because as we're seeing these images of Dean, we're also flashing back and forth to these images of her uncle, her aunt, and their kids. And we'll talk about Uncle Neil a little bit more in the next chapter, Matt. But we see that Crystal is with them in each of these images, except, well, she kind of is, because in the first one we see Then Eric and Sarah and Uncle Neil with Crystal out of focus. And then once again, we flash back to them and they're at a pool party, and Crystal is at the pool too, but only visible as shadows as she swam underwater. So in both these instances where she's seeing images of Crystal, she doesn't really see Crystal. And I haven't like come to a conclusion about this, but I think this is one of those things that jumps out at you as like subtly drawing our attention to this thing as a payoff that's going to come later. I don't know for what reason, but it really jumped out at me, especially on my second read.
Yes, I think this is one of those things where it got my wheels turning, thinking about how early in the story Crystal came into play as a character, and like that to me is always a little bit of a certain kind of foreshadowing. Like if you're going to have someone become important surprisingly, then it helps if they were at least there from the beginning.
Sure.
And I like that, we've seen Wildbow loves to play with light imagery, and I like the idea that she's out of focus in one, she's underwater in one. It's like these are both different interesting ways of portraying like distortion, visual light distortion. And yeah, I don't know what it means. I have no idea what it means, but I do agree with you that it probably means something. And it might the most kind of bombshell thing it could mean would just be like, she didn't have her powers yet in these images, and it doesn't really care about people who don't have powers.
Yeah, that could be.
It's like that could be it. I kind of think it's more than that, but that could be it.
Sure. Yeah.
So cool. The crystal stuff is interesting though.
Yeah. Let's pay attention to that, because I think that is going to come back in some way in the future.
Yeah. So we also revisit Ashley's past. So I think a lot of what's happening in this little section is about shattering illusions, or maybe revealing truths, because Victoria and also Kinsey here get to see Ashley at her worst. And Damsel makes sure to clarify that although she knows now that Jay was indeed the Jewel of Boston, a villain working for Accord, at the time she did not. At the time, she just thought he was a boy that she was maybe in love with, and killed him. And Victoria thinks that this is the region where people we loved dwelt. Maybe she's right. It seems to me more like it's the realm of terrible betrayals by people that we loved.
Yeah, I mean, I think really terrible betrayal only comes from a person that you love, right? Just like if you don't care about someone that deeply, you can't be betrayed by them. But I mean, I love this section. I love this so much, and I think this is kind of answering a question that's been open, like, was Ashley right about Jay? And I think you and I even said at the time that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether she was right or not, because regardless of whether she was right or not, she made the choice of being uncertain about it. Right. And that says something about her regardless. And that's basically what Ashley is arguing here, that, yeah, I was right, but I wasn't sure about that and did this anyway. Look how terrible I am.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah. And Damsel, in her desperate attempt to paint Swansong as not all that great, makes that connection, right? Mm-hmm. The Ashley that you loved, Victoria, Kenzie, is the same Ashley that did this. We did this. We made that choice. We're no different from each other. Like, which of course is technically true, right? Like, Swansong is the same person that made that choice, but that doesn't matter, like, because she's grown beyond that. Like, that's the difference between Damsel and Swansong, between Rain and Cradle, and in some ways even between Victoria and Amy. It's not what you did, it's what you do now. And I think Jessica makes that explicit in the first of our two Amy chapters, right? That that what matters is how you take that information and how you grow and change as a person. You can sit here and try to say that the Ashley that you liked was this person, but you can't convince Kenzie that Swansong is a piece of shit now because of a thing she did then. Like, she ascended from that person. She is not that same person. She has grown beyond that person. And Damsel knows that. And so, like, to me, this whole thing, like, rang hollow. It's like, it's not working. It's not working, Damsel.
Yeah, this is one of the many points where in these chapters, Damsel's trying to poke at them and is not getting the reaction that she wants.
Yeah.
And right here, like, it's definitely sad Kenzie to see, but she kind of
Sure.
she kind of knew about this already. Maybe not in the full details of it, but it isn't enough to really kind of destroy her faith in Swansong, which is what Damsel wants it to do. And
And the interesting thing about, I think that is definitely what Damsel is trying to do. But there's another interpretation on this that I kind of like, because as much as this is her trying to connect Swansong back to that terrible version of herself to prove how terrible she is, how much of this is also Damsel desperately trying to prove that she is the same person as Swansong, to prove that she is worthy because she is that same person, because we have the same past, right? I love that too. Like this desperate attempt to link them, not to bring down Swansong, but to try to elevate herself. I think that's really interesting.
I like that. I like that idea. That's great.
So there's just, I just like this quick part here where like Damsel has just done her worst to Kenzie, and Kenzie's response is, "I think you're great, Damsel. You're stylish and beautiful and intimidating and badass and awesome, and you're a kick-ass villain who's only going to kick more ass as time goes on." And Damsel asked. "That's all," Kenzie said as she smiled at Damsel. Damsel, for her part, smiled back. "And here I thought you'd be clever." I love this because, as Victoria points out immediately, she is being clever. She just played you. She just absolutely played you, and you fell right into it. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's a really great moment. I mean, it's also cool because it shows Victoria does not have to step in here.
You're right.
Maybe she steps in the sense that she's present, but Kenzie handles this like very easily and deftly. She knows Ashley well enough that she just knows she can get away. She can just diffuse the situation this easily. Yeah,
I think you're right. I didn't think of that way, but that is a point for Kenzie, is just being able to do that. She's smart, capable, and she is clever, and she knows that Damsel is seeing through Victoria's attempts to placate her, but coming from Kenzie, it has a different meaning, a different power to it, and it works immediately.
That's true, because Victoria is less like Victoria is a little bit too. She doesn't have exactly the right approach. Mm-hmm. There's a few times in this this arc actually, where Damsel is like, "You're buttering me up," and like she's aware that Victoria's buttering her up. Somehow the way Kenzie does it just comes off as earnest.
Well, because I think it kind of is. Yeah. Like I don't think she's lying here.
Right.
I don't think anything Kenzie just said is nothing she doesn't believe.
Yeah.
But she's doing it with purpose. She's doing it. She has a plan behind it.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
So Victoria experiments with getting more in tune with the landscape. She makes her way to an incline that overlooks a white crack in the landscape being worked on by teacher's thralls and 3 agents, working to prompt a cascade of connections.
Man, I love this. Like, we've been talking so much about connection and, community throughout this entire book. And then we have this moment here where teacher, who is very clearly trying to connect to this whole shard world up together, and the way it's written makes that seem terrifying. This thing that we called objectively good when it's people trying to connect and find each other, this is like the bastardized, terrible version of it, and it's terrifying, right? Like the lighting here, I watched as light flickered, dancing across the landscape, across the sky, and to the great black fissure. Stuttering lights connected to everything nearby like a blinding flash of lightning, utterly silent, that left ghostly images of planet-sized monstrosities dancing amid the spots in my eyes. It's beautifully ominous writing there. And again, using light imagery in a negative way, right? Something we normally see as positive is kind of turned on its head here. This is blinding light. It's overpowering light. It's beautiful in its horror.
Yeah.
I love it.
Right, and the light is literally communication between alien monsters.
Yes, yeah. That's great. You took it. Yeah, that's perfect. I like that.
All right, moving on to 16.12. So we more or less begin with, this world was like a broken window. The landscape cracked, and the fact the light didn't travel to where it needed to go served as a suggestion of just how broken it was.
That just continues on the last chapter's beautiful imagery, right?
Yeah.
The world was like a broken window. The landscape cracked.
Yeah.
It's poetic. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, we did basically just say this, but this idea that we've played with light imagery so much here, and yet again, we have this refractive, basically light conductive crystal substrate that the light is moving through.
Yep.
And it's red, of course, which we've mentioned many times, but got our color game going still.
Absolutely.
So Tattletale observes that the light travels from the thralls into the distance, which suggests where Teacher might be located. The team can't get over there, though. The crystal landscape is shattered, and that means they can't get between places physically. As programs themselves, they can't travel between disconnected regions of the substrate.
Sure.
That's my take anyway.
Computers. Bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop.
Yes.
From a purely structural writing standpoint, I really appreciate what the book is doing here early in this chapter. One of the things I was worried about, and I think I mentioned it last week, was that these chapters would get so abstract and enormous that they would start to maybe feel aimless, like you kind of lose the thread a little bit here. But this is the beginning of our final chapter, non-interlude chapter of this arc, and Wildbow sets the goal clearly here. We think Teacher's over there, we want to get over there, but we can't get over there, so now we've got to do something that gets us over there. Like, this is these chapters are huge and cosmic and almost beyond comprehension, but here we've refocused the plot, right? We've gone down to just plot momentum is like goal, solutions, go. And so we can do all this deeper thematic meaning and cosmic horror stuff on top of our main thrusts forward into accomplishing goal. And I think it's a great way to recenter yourself into the final chapter where things are about to get like really weird. It's really good. I like it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's interesting. I think Wildbow knows when he needs to keep things simple, right? And we're keeping things, with all of the craziness that's surrounding this, we're actually keeping it pretty simple. We need to find Teacher. Okay, we have some clue as to where Teacher is. How are we going to go about that? And then they begin to, think through the problem solving element of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Victoria begins to be overwhelmed by frustration and an uncharacteristic panic, a feeling of paralysis. She considers why this could be happening, and she decides that it's internal. It's coming from her. And she basically just continues to physically react to this panic for several minutes, and not really sure that we ever really kind of unlock what happened, what is happening, where this is coming from. No.
I mean, I love this as just Victoria, the girl who wants to punch her problems away, who loves these physical, tangible solutions to physical, tangible problems. And the situation she's in has none of those by design. Like, this isn't real, right? This is a construct. So, like, the odds that you're going to be able to punch your way out of this problem, which actually, by the end of it, she literally does that. Right. But the idea that you're going to be able to punch yourself out of this problem seems less likely here. And I like this as like this feeling of complete powerlessness in this situation that sends her spiraling. And it's not specifically attached to any of her previous triggers, right? It's not attached to Amy. It's not attached to Crawler and the acid. It's not attached to her parents. It's just this overwhelming feeling of hopelessness that's so abrupt that her first reaction is to look around and make sure that no one's powers are being used on her. But she finds, of course, that it is coming from within. And she recognizes that, and she recognizes that it's coming from inside her, and she starts to try to deal with it almost immediately. Like she's not doing very well, as you said. She's kind of begging for Tattletale to distract her as Tattletale starts to outline what she thinks is going on here and outlining the plan. But she's dealing as best she can, because there's recognition of this is coming from within me, and I need to deal with this. And I'm only saying this because I'm trying to set up something that I'm going to pay off in the next chapter, which we could call From Without.
Yeah, I like that. I that was kind of my only guess as to what was going on with her, was like she's finally feeling the frustration of not having her powers and being in a situation where she needs them. Whereas like before, she just kind of threw herself into the fight with grasping self. Now she can't do that. That's not an option. She can't fight 50 people. She knows that. And so she just begins to feel this panic, this feeling of I can't do anything about this. That was my guess.
Yeah.
All right.
But literal and metaphorical powerlessness are adding up. I like that.
Yeah. And then Tattletale says, I'm just going to read this. Matt was right about everything. The shard world is all about communication, and powers which permit or operate through inter-shard communication are the ones that are going to be most useful here. Good job, Matt.
Wow.
And then they say Darling is basically serving as their local hub, which is why they're all able to kind of be together. So in order to physically get the teacher, they'll need some kind of link to him via powers.
Yeah, it's really kind of amazing how, like, just very uncharacteristically, Lisa just broke the fourth wall and complimented you specifically and nobody else. Really wild. I mean, we were talking about the metatextual relationship of this book, but I didn't realize just how far it went. It's crazy.
I know. I mean, here I am metatextually changing the text in our discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the great thing I love about it is you're just so humble. You're just so humble about it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean,
no, that was in all seriousness, well done. I think you did basically perfectly outline how this whole thing works. So,
well, the way this usually goes is that this is about when Wildbow says, like, no, actually, no.
No, I think you're good. I think you're good.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that we've also established. I love this idea of, like, we're all here in this world, but we're not connected to each other. So we're going to need to connect to him in some way. And the only way to do that is through powers.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yep. So, yeah.
So I love during this. I just want to point this out because it's fun. During this, Rain says, okay, well, can we hack it? Can we, instead of making a connection from outside, can we form a connection from within? I don't have anything else to say other than every time I see the phrase "from within," and I'm like,
Yeah. I love it too. And I love Rain. I love it when Rain gets to say things.
I love Rain.
So I like how Tattletale just writes off the possibility that Chicken's power couldn't possibly be used to connect to another parahuman.
Yeah, well, let's fucking hope not, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably reading too much into it, but I was like, is she just trying to make it so that nobody makes that connection, or does she really think that? Because I don't know, whatever. So yeah, she
I think with Lisa, the answer is it's both.
It's both.
It's always both.
Perfect. So she concludes that her power, Lisa, that is, her power is the only one that could really be used from within the shard space to form non-pre-existing connections to teacher. So she wants to use her power as a bridge. Victoria wants to use decadence, which apparently they could conceivably get to teacher through like a daisy chain of powers connections that they surmise might exist.
Yeah, but seems a lot less sure, right?
Yeah, right.
But what I love about this is in the process of discussing this whole thing, Tattletale is basically like revealing the full scope of what her power is to Victoria and everyone else. This is something that even as we move through this story and Victoria has kind of learned a little bit more about, she's still kind of held back. And now it's like, no, this is my power. This is how it works. I'm explaining all this to you exactly. I think this is interesting because I think this is a reflection maybe of how worried and kind of desperate Lisa is feeling in this moment, that she's done caring about that kind of stuff, that this is life or death. We barely survived last time, and if things are going to happen, I want control over it. I want to be the one that controls where it's going to go down, and therefore I might have to reveal some stuff about me and my power that I didn't want to in the past.
Absolutely, yeah. Narratively, that does give us a sense that the stakes are about as high as they can get when Lisa tells people about her power. That's something she's always held very close to the chest, even with people she nominally trusts.
Yeah.
Like even the Undersiders, I think she was not necessarily 100% transparent about that from the get.
Yeah. We also learn a little bit more about Candy's power and how it can work on other parahuman powers as well. That's why the daisy chain thing will work. And this again is cool in the moment, but it is also, to me, one of those very cleverly hidden setups that might pay off in a cool way in the future. Or maybe even not like an explicit setup, or just like a thing defined so that if I get in a situation where I need to use this in the future, it's already been defined that it works this way.
Right.
We talked about that during Worm a lot, that not all this has to be an explicit set off with a payoff in mind, set up with a payoff in mind, but it could just be something, defining something so that I have the option of using it later.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. So the team votes on whether they're going to use Decadent or Tattletale's power, and Tattletale wins. The only ones who vote for Victoria's idea of using Decadent are Byron, Rain, and Kenzie. So can we read a lot into this? Of course we can.
Let's do it, Matt. Why Byron?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like here's the so like you can think of multiple reasons, right? But what's interesting is like I see these three characters as being the most biased in Victoria's favor.
Sure.
And like I feel like Kenzie might literally just be voting with Victoria because it's Victoria, and she's not going to vote against Victoria with Tattletale, who she knows Victoria isn't best friends with.
Sure.
Rain, I'm not really sure what his reasoning is.
Well, I think there's been low-key this really, really firm buildup of mutual respect.
Yeah.
And between Rain and Victoria throughout like the book. And so I was not surprised to see him side with her here at all. Like it felt like a natural evolution of the complex nature of their relationship that's been going on for a few arcs now, where she was really kind of snippy and jerky to him, and he kind of earned his place, and there's been this growing respect between them. So that didn't jump out at me as different at all.
Yeah. Part of me wants to say that Victoria and Byron also had their period of basically going through the gauntlet together when the whole goddess thing was going on.
Sure.
But there's also perhaps a more amusing possibility, which is just that Tristan voted for Tattletale's plan.
Did Byron vote after Tristan? I don't remember.
I'm not sure.
That would be funny.
Yeah, that's all I got for now, though. So
sure. Also, to just add up upon this whole thing, though, we have Victoria, who's already kind of in this panic mode, and then she's once again left things up to a vote, and the vote has gone against her. The last time that happened, she knew they were making the wrong decision, right? It was the splitting up to fight against Cradle. She knew that was the wrong decision, but she put it up to a vote, and she lost, and so she went with everyone else and was like, oh, shit, I was wrong. This time, she's not so sure that her plan is the right one and their plan is the wrong one, but she, like, is so kind of distrusting of Tattletale that she's trying to come up with other options anyway, even if they're going towards this power source. And I think it's very understandable from the point of view of a character who just watched Lisa, like lose her shit at her just for this perceived, oh, Victoria has gotten an image of me that makes me uncomfortable, and I'm going to lash out. And now you're going to head to her den, her shard den. It seems like that it's going to be a whole bunch of people getting more up close and personal with Lisa than she's comfortable with at all. So I understand her reticence here. I do think it's very interesting that Victoria is conscious enough to draw back to that last vote and note again that, hey, she lost again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, she does point out the distinction between these two times. Like last time, she literally just went along with it because she was like,
sure.
I don't want to make waves. Here, I don't think she's just going along with it. I think she's just like, well, I have my reservations, but it's a vote.
Yeah, I mean, she's planning other options, right?
Yeah.
Like she's like, all right, I'm going to go along with this, but I'm going to be thinking of other solutions.
Yeah.
And she immediately like starts trying to talk to Damsel to be like, all right, help me figure this out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. She's talking to Damsel. They're digging through a deeper understanding of the nature of this place, and really she understands it pretty well. Like she's the one who actually makes this connection for us between what's going on now and the conversations surrounding March, where March was talking about like, oh yeah, it's great, super cool. We die and then we get to go to the red crystal world, which she glimpsed in her interlude, but she has a completely wrong impression of it. And Swansong here is saying, yeah, you die, you go here, but it sucks. She says Swansong's. Basically she's saying if you die now that Scion is dead, your afterlife sucks balls. And
yeah,
and of course Kinsey puts the dots together and says Swansong's death is worse than it was before. Who cares? Damsel asked. Me, duh. Kinsey said. All of us. You. and then her response is to like angrily march ahead faster. I love
Yeah,
this.
she shakes her head and picks up her pace, and like the obvious like "fuck you're right" admission ever. Like I love here that Kenzie has just got her number.
Yeah.
Like she really does. She's just like she was close enough to Swansong that she and this version of Ashley is a different person than Swansong is, but she just has her pegged, and she's like not putting up with her bullshit. She's like, you obviously you care.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, first of all, like this obviously matters not just because you care about Swansong, but it means when you die, your death is going to be worse too.
Right.
Like obviously you care.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And not setting aside the fact that they like live together for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't this mean that anyone who dies from now on, this is going to happen? Like, or like this is any cape that dies. This is your future.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
Yeah. So obviously everyone cares.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So they make their way into thickets of crystal now, and it's dark. It's described as being darker than I was imagining, actually.
Yeah, like they're tripping over crystal.
Yeah, they're like almost. Yeah, right, exactly. And they frequently, they almost run over stuff. They stumble. So then they stumble across another agent, a big one with spikes radiating from her head to infinity and empty eye sockets.
We'll call this one Miss Spiky Head.
Sounds good.
Is there any guess? Do you have any fun guess on who Miss Spiky Head might belong to? Like what cape this agent goes to? Does it even work that way? I don't fucking know, man.
I don't know. I like my first thought was like, is it ingenue? And then I was like trying to put that together, and I was like, no, I can't really make that work. But because what it's described as being able to do is so like native to the Shardscape. It's like, yeah, I mean, it could be ingenue, but I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't really think so, honestly.
I don't know if there's enough there to actually make a conclusion. I just want to have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Ingenue is a good guess.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
So Tattletale's agent is also present, and it looks like a pair of linked cones endlessly rotating. I'm put in mind of a disk drive.
Yeah, can we just like, this is one of those moments where I just want to read the text, like, because it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I look over and I can see that past the tear in the landscape, Tattletale's agent was an extension of the landscape, built almost like a cone poised on another cone, except it was a person's body in a toga-cut dress, twisting and rotating in jerks, like every movement snapped its own spine. It had an abstract, eyeless, mouthless head bearing a full head of thick cords that could have been wires that trailed down to the crystal below it. Each jerky rotation suggested a different number of arms as she interacted with the forest around her, bringing up images just by facing each crystal. Each image that was brought up sparked off transmission for elsewhere. And I could see it now that we were closer. There were more small, almost imperceptible sparks traveling from each spike to elsewhere. It was barely visible, but with 1,000 spikes all together. And then it just kind of zones out at the majesty of it all. I just like, it's like this abstract, cosmic, terrible thing that also like makes perfect description sense for what Tattletale's power is and how it works. Like the literal manifestation of how Tattletale's power works here, which is like the thing is creating crystals and then using those crystals to reflect things, is like a perfect way to visualize what her power does. Like, I love it. I was just like, I read this and I was like, of course, that makes perfect sense. I love it so much.
Yeah, right. And it ends up being kind of utilitarian too, in the sense of narratively they're able to interact with it in this space in a way that's very dramatic. Sure. Like that's the cool thing, is that Tattletale's power in her head is kind of an internal monologue, kind of an intrusive monologue. But here we're doing it in this visual milieu, and I think that works really well for what it plugs in really well with everything that's been going on in these chapters. There's this really fun, progression over the course of these two or three chapters as they learn more about the nature of the images they're seeing in the shard faces, and you go from just kind of being acquainted with it to this is like an oracle. It can answer your questions, and pretty much everything it's going to show you is going to suck, just like everything up till now has sucked. But this is going to be even worse. Yeah. Absolutely. Because it lies. Yeah. Or does it? Right.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Tattletale's agent, which they called the Negotiator for reasons that I'm not entirely certain of, honestly, distracts Spiky Head Lady Shard, and then they run through the thicket, now facing moments when they were attacked, injured, damaged, crawlers vomit, Kenzie's face smashed into a plate, violence and pain.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments where I really start to think about this, right? Because like suddenly we're in this tense moment, and suddenly all the visions that are crowding our characters are violent, are destructive, are some of their worst memories, their worst injuries, their worst pains. It's it's brutal. And like I'm not clear, is the shards they're running through now like specifically Tattletale shards making them see this, or is this just the sect of shard space they're in happens to be the violent pain section of shard space? I think it's the latter.
Yeah,
right?
the latter was my assumption. I feel like we're just being like different parts of the space are just dedicated to different terrible things.
Yeah,
and this is the last section they get through before they get to Tattletale. That's true.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't it thematically fitting that like the section that Tattletale's agent hangs out in is the violence and pain memories section of shard space?
Sure. Yeah.
Like I think that's wonderful. I love that a lot.
Yeah. That does make sense. So Victoria speaks to give orders, and she realizes that the shards of crystal near the Negotiator react to her by creating images. So she forms the connection to Teacher by asking a question about him, but then she can't fucking stop herself from asking questions about all the people she cares about. Amelia Levere, Mark Dallin, Amy Dallin, Panacea, the Red Queen, Carol Dallin, Chris Ellman, and Jessica.
Oh boy. So, I mean, we have to talk about the fact that she names Amy 4 times,
right?
And with 4 different names. And I love that each time a different facet is shown to her, right? As it's a different interpretation, it's a different mask, it's a different personality that she's putting on. So we see a different version of Amy in all those.
Yeah. Right.
And I mean, we could go through those one by one. I don't want to, because the Amy Dallin one is very extremely disturbing, and I don't want to talk about that. But I think just the general idea that like she can't help herself but look in on Amy is fascinating.
Yeah.
And all the facets of Amy, not just one, not just Amy Dallin, not just Amelia, all of them.
Yeah, she almost compulsively keeps asking about Amy. She kind of can't get enough information about her, and it's really pretty irrelevant to what's going on right now. It's just her satisfying her. I mean, I don't know what the right word is. Her extremely deep anxiety about Amy.
Yeah, but like, if you had the power, like that's the thing is like if you had the ability to just ask a question and see an answer, as a person who, as Victoria states later in this chapter, she's a person who likes getting answers to questions. It must be really freaking hard to stop. Yeah. And I think that's a reflection of like what it's like to have Tattletale's power day in and day out, right? Like you have this thing sitting, and you know if you ask it a question, it's going to give you an answer. You know it will. How do you stop yourself from asking it?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and Tattletale addresses that explicitly in a second. But yeah, just like you said, there's a lot of stuff here, but basically the gist of it is that all these pictures she sees are of people at their worst, or at least doing stuff that would hurt Victoria, like Uncle Neil nailing Carol 21 years ago. Mm-hmm. All lies, Tattletale unconvincingly assures her. So we talked. There was a lot of discussion about this in the Discord. I think in the subreddit too.
See, I miss all this. I miss all this fun talk.
I know, but so like something that I kind of settled on is this idea that like it shows the first parts of things and then leaves you to fill in the worst possible interpretation of it. So like,
sure.
So like Uncle Nail nailing Carol 21 years ago. We don't actually see that. We see them start to get hot and heavy, and then the camera cuts away. And that could just be narrative choice of, the Shard not wanting to show Victoria, full sex on, I don't know why the Shard would be approved exactly.
God, it's so nice of the Shard to not have to show me that. Yeah, thanks, Shard.
But on the other hand, maybe that's all that happened, and
sure.
So, and I mean, I think we're probably gonna get like a confirmation at some point Maybe not, though. Maybe not. I don't know. So anyway, I just like this idea that it's not necessarily even that it's lying. It's that it's showing you something and then leaving you to fill in the gaps. And Victoria is filling in the gaps. We see her jumping to conclusions. Maybe they're the right conclusions, but she's absolutely extrapolating from what she's been shown.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, if we layer this on top of what we already understand about Tattletale's power, that makes perfect sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that Tattletale is told incorrect information explicitly. It's that it is usually information based off of preconceived assumptions, and then when you when you take information based off an assumption and then extrapolate off of that information, you lead yourself down a road where you could just be totally wrong. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's right that she lies. I mean, I think we've been circling around this is Neil Victoria's father idea for a while now, right? We've had some very interesting little bits that seem to indicate that maybe that is so. There's a bit in the last chapter we didn't talk about where Chicken Little is looking at her mother, and then when Victoria steps in front of that same crystal, there's a moment where Neil pops up, and it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. Why would it's clearly apparent there. Mm-hmm. and so, like, could this be the truth? Could this be this Tattletale specific power reacting to a worry or a fear that Victoria herself already had in her? I don't know. I think there is certain truths to it, for sure, but I do agree with you that, like, the extrapolation, the taking that one bit of information and then deciding, oh, not only did Uncle Neil and my mother hook up at one point, but that must mean, therefore, I am his daughter. And that is a representative of the worst betrayal that my mother could possibly do to me, is that my father wasn't even really my father. That is not what the shard shows her. Right. She doesn't stay looking at it long enough to see that's what the shard shows her.
Yeah. And all of that just speaks to what a bad mental place she's in, that she's just ready to believe all of the worst possible things. Yeah. Immediately without even really. I mean, her defenses are down, right? Like, I think if Victoria with her defenses up would be at least kind of some skeptical distance between seeing that and just jumping to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But we do learn that Crystal is, not a traitor in any specific way.
It's a really heartbreaking scene we see of Carol, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's trying desperately to chop carrots or something.
Yeah.
And she's still not right.
Yeah.
And so she's struggling with it, and Crystal's there to help out. So yeah, I feel like we're setting something up with Crystal, man.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm worried about it. But
yeah,
because it's like we got this subtly hinted at thing in the last chapter, and then a specific declaration of, okay, Crystal's the only one I have. Crystal's my trust in all these people is deteriorating as I'm learning this stuff about them, but at least this person, at least I got this person. Oh, really? Okay. Let's take them away. Let's see what happens when we remove the puppy.
Yeah, I can't. I'm just gonna say it because it keeps occurring to me. This idea that her name is Crystal.
Yeah, I mean, that is perfect.
We're in Crystal Land, and it's like, I don't know, does it mean something?
Sure.
Crystals refract light. This is all about light. Her name is Crystal. Whatever. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we even had this text draw attention to the fact that her name is Crystal when Valkyrie was like, I don't see the connection between your powers and Crystal. And Crystal's like, that's just my name.
Yeah.
Like the text literally pointed out to us that her name is unique. So
good catch. Good. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm just going to read a big chunk of Tattletale because I love this. I love the prose, or I love the writing. I love the pathos and the depth of this character, and her saying something that we've kind of been building to this whole story, where other people have been hinting that this is the way things are for her, but this is just her confessing it. You could ask it a million questions and understand everything. I bet there are less filters while we're in here, probably. Tattletale told me. I always thought of myself as an answer seeker, I said. Yeah, sure. Absolutely, Tattletale said, quiet. Here's the deal, though. By the time you're done asking a million questions, I guarantee you that you're going to hate everyone and everything. You'll abhor them, despise them, be afraid of them. I looked away from the crystals, which had gone dim. Tattletale's expression was sad. Sometimes you gotta just pick a few promising runts out of the litter and just plug in that one big assumption, she told me. Start with the assumption that they're good people and build on that belief. Sometimes they step it up and live up to what you think of them.
Ugh.
Love it. I mean,
It's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
The thing I love about this is Lisa is not being argumentative. She's not being confrontational. She is being upfront and honest and real. She's talking quietly and sadly. This is her, showing Victoria one of the deepest truths about why she is the way she is.
mm-hmm.
And she's not doing it in a way that like she's just being vulnerable. She's being really vulnerable to her here, and not in a very Lisa kind of way. And I love it. I love that she's willing to do that with
Yeah.
her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that she has kind of swung the pendulum of her lashing out at Victoria a couple chapters ago has swung the other direction. She's realized that wasn't fair. I mean, I think she knew it wasn't fair even at the time, but she was emotional. Sure. And I don't know if this is exactly an attempt to make amends, but this is her having had some time to deal with being re-traumatized by seeing her trigger event, and her and Victoria have become close in their weird head buddy way, and I think that she's ready to show some vulnerability to Victoria. So that's part of why I love this.
Yeah, and you have to think that Tattletale can see the answers that Victoria is getting, right? And she's asking her questions, right? So I do like the idea of she's being kind here as kind of compensating for the immense cruelty she showed her a few chapters ago, but also just that maybe she understands her on a different level now too. Like this idea, she saw her trigger event and saw her as this person that just lost to the basketball game, and that's all the bad thing that happened to you. But now she's seeing as Victoria is answering these questions, she's really seeing and maybe understanding the extent with which the terrible things she's gone through with people, and also seeing a kindred spirit of the type of person that feels it necessary to ask these questions when given the opportunity, and maybe is like, no, don't trust me. This is not a route you want to go down. This is not something you want to do. This is not where you want to go.
Yeah,
because it's only going to end in horribleness. And
right, and sort of fails to persuade her of that because
she keeps on asking questions.
Keeps asking, yeah, right.
But I wanted to talk to you a bit about this good people line, because I think this is a line that's going to pay off really interestingly right in our next chapter, right? This idea that you just got to pick a few promising runs out of the litter and just plug in that one big assumption. Start with the assumption that they're good people and build on that belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really interesting. And I think it's a really interesting reflection of these characters' definitions of how they define good people versus Amy's definition of that in the next chapter. That these people, like, you have to go in with that assumption and build on that and use your power building on that basic assumption. Whereas Amy's kind of assumption is that she is the only good people and everyone else is bad people unless they think she's good people.
Yeah, well, I think what Tattletale is basically saying is you have to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And Amy's perspective is basically everyone should always give me the benefit of the doubt.
And I will give it not at all to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the opposite and not the same. Yes.
Yes.
Just kind of an aside, one of the things that we apparently learned is that in one of the other ABCD whatever branches that Contessa gave them, Rain used his blades to break Teacher's portal and then he got killed. I guess that's just kind of... are we supposed to take that at face value? I think probably yes. Probably,
yeah, but she doesn't want to go too far down those paths because it could mess up what Contessa did, yeah.
Yeah, right. And then my favorite topic, the Jessica attacking Bonesaw.
Strangling Bonesaw child to death.
Is Bonesaw dead? Are these images literal? And she thinks to herself, Bonesaw never came back. Jessica quit being a therapist. And so, like, this is kind of what I mean with the jumping to conclusions thing, because what's funny is I went into the Discord after reading this chapter and I said a bunch of stuff and it was all premised on this idea that Bonesaw is dead. And some people were like, wait a minute, why are you assuming Bonesaw is dead? Like we saw her, like Valkyrie saw her after she kind of met them, after she found them. So like when would Jessica have had time to kill her? And I was like, oh wow, I just completely jumped to the conclusion that Jessica had killed her, which funnily enough, we don't even see Victoria explicitly make that connection, but I kind of assume that's what Bonesaw never came back meant. But anyway, then some people kind of pushed back on me and were like, how do we even know, like what if these images aren't literal? What if they're just conveying information and sentiment, but they're not actually meant to be like, this is what exactly happened?
Yeah, sure.
And I'm kind of like, I actually don't fully buy that. Like, I don't know why it would be that way. I don't know what we would be gaining, like storytelling wise, if they were not basically literal, but everyone can have their own interpretation, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of I wonder if this is like a chicken and egg situation here, because like these lines, Bonesaw never came back, Jessica quit being a therapist, these could be conclusions that you think about after you see the image, or these could be the things that you had in the back of your head that caused the image to appear, right? Mm-hmm. Like you were wondering about this already, and therefore when you ask Jessica, here's a thing that I extrapolate happened based on the knowledge you had, or the knowledge that was known. I don't know. I think it's interesting either way. I do think something went down, because Jessica does come back different. Right. And where the hell is Bonesaw? She's still not around. So I'm going to say a solid, confident to the question of, are these images literal? Maybe.
Right. I think that's the fun thing about this, is that it could go either way on pretty much all of these questions, right?
Sure.
Although one other thing I ended up kind of settling on was, like, if we end up learning unequivocally that Mark is Victoria's dad, then that will be a bit of that will make me immediately doubt all of these other things that we saw. Like, oh, okay, then I'm much less sure that Bonesaw is actually dead.
Yeah, so. or at least doubt the extrapolation of it.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah, like specifically Bonesaw dead, right? Because that is the conclusion that she kind of reaches herself.
Yeah.
We don't literally see her die.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that would be an easy way for the story to kind of demonstrate that, is like by saying, no, of course Mark's your father. What are you talking about?
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. So subsequent to seeing all of this heinous shit from all the people that she thought she could trust, or at least sort of trust, Victoria reasonably, totally rationally, suicidally jumps across the chasm to the next crystal thingy. And when she hits the ground, she simultaneously, dually crushes her body to a pulp and swaps out with another body, making a fantastic hero landing.
Yeah, this is a great way of doing it. That is not really the plan. This was not the plan, but it is now. What I love is that from this moment on, the chapter and the arc suddenly like roars to its climax, right? Like we've had this slow build of these terrifying and sad moments where we're revealing truths about our characters and having them go through stuff, and then suddenly it's like, fuck, let's go. And it's just headlong into the end from here on out. It's like sprinting towards the end.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. And they've been throughout this section, they were kind of hunkering down because the spiked agent is nearby and it's kind of trying to get to them. And so there is this time pressure, but yeah, once she crosses the chasm, it's immediate battle, right? So the spiked agent chases her, stabs her through the hand, and she calls out to waste. And glass, gold, and glory arrive. A fragile shell with nothing in it, radiating light.
So this is kind of what we see here, right? This is why Teacher hesitated, right? Because this idea, or at least that's what Victoria says here. This is why Teacher hesitated, because I have this open door connection to my agent, and therefore can summon my agent and kind of control my agent in a similar way to maybe Teacher does his, although not exactly. But so she summons Waste. Let's talk about this look, like this fragile glass gold with this light emitting in center, and it just attacks and shatters and destroys and reforms constantly. Like it's a perfect picture of what Waste is. This like piece of shit, this piece of garbage that just charges into stuff, collapses and then reforms and then does it again.
Yeah.
I love it. But I mean, like this is not what I thought oh, Victoria's connection to her shard this is not how I thought this was going to pay off in shard space. I thought it was going to pay off in a disastrous way, and it almost pays off in a triumphant way here.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool moment, actually. It's
Sure.
Waste just comes in like a wrecking ball and saves her, completely bails her out. Right? There's really no negative consequence, unless, of course, you consider that Victoria ends up succeeding as being a potential negative consequence. Yeah, it's great. And the gold, we've got the gold, we've got the glass refracting light.
You know what I hope? I hope that this whole thing just evolves into everyone having like Pokemon battles with their agents, and that's what the final battle is.
And then the agents are like, this is great because we get the conflict that we wanted. And the humans are like, and we don't have to die.
Waste, useless smash attack.
Yeah. You
Now.
leveled up.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. You've solved it. Yeah, so Victoria gets away, and before we know it, we're upon Teacher. And Teacher is physically wrapped around his agent like tinsel on a Christmas tree.
How fucking horrifying. Disturbing is that? So it's like, at first I thought like he was just like riding it, like just like dino riding a shard. That's like it's where my brain immediately went, because my brain has a very hard time like dealing with the concept of his skin is just like wrapped around this thing in the most disturbing way possible. But then, I went back and reread it and was like, oh God, this is terrible.
It's wearing him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awful. Like, and no wonder he was all sweaty when he got out of that place.
Yeah. It didn't feel so good. Yeah.
I'm sure it didn't.
Right. So first, Victoria manages to break something that frees the Spike Woman agent from Teacher's control, then picks out a crystal to smash. And she's channeling some major angry at mom energy as she rushes to smash the final crystal, which she deems promising. She succeeds, and then wakes up to a super pissed off Defiant.
Yeah, so let's talk about this choice here at the end. Like, their time is ticking down. They are rushing to the end. She sees this crystal. She's pissed off at her mom, and then she sees Teacher wants this thing, and she's like, oh, well, that's a thing my mom taught me, my mom that I'm angry at. I'll just break this thing. And she's not like sure what's going to happen, right? It's like she even questions herself, was this end the world? No. Or was this no, my plans? No. Oh, well, I'll roll the dice and just punch this thing really hard and see what happens. It's reckless to an extreme. And I know like they're backed up against the wall and their time is ticking down and she has to do something. But this seems like it very easily could have gone the other way had anything else happened.
Yeah, I'm so anxious about this. I mean, I've suspected for some time now that like Victoria's choices are going to lead to some terrible outcome.
Sure.
And so Defiant says you didn't end the world, but there's a lot of gray area between it was good and the world ended.
Right. I mean, he's pissed off. And I like, look, it is very possible that he could just be pissed off because, hey, you didn't listen to me pissed off.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's going to be more than just, hey, you didn't listen to me pissed off.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's going to be, what have you done, you stupid idiot? What have you done?
Yeah, I think you're right. All right. So that basically wraps up our Victoria chapters for the arc. And now let's get into the long-awaited 16.y Amy.
Yeah, that was, everything else was just a warm-up. Now we're on to the main event of the week.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is why, everyone, we split this and we did not do 4 chapters.
Uh-huh. Because we're going to be going, I don't know how much longer we're going to be going from here, but I'm going to guess a little bit.
Let me look at where our task, oh no, it's 10 more pages. Go, Matt, go.
Okay. Yeah, so been dreading this one, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think I want to pause here before we get into this and talk about expectations a little bit. After everything that's happened in this book, Amy is awful has become a rather uncontroversial opinion, right? That's a generally held opinion. Amy sucks. Amy's terrible. But the worm formula has always been wait till the character's interlude, right? If you hate them now, you'll read an interlude and you'll feel terrible for them by the end of it, at the end of the interlude. This is kind of what I was expecting, even as recently as a week ago. I was still kind of expecting that we would get an explanation or an understanding of a character that would lead us to perhaps see them in a different, maybe better light, right? This chapter is most certainly not that. It's not that I don't feel bad for Amy by the end of this interlude. I do in a very specific kind of way that we'll get into as we go. But this is certainly not the let's paint the character in a sympathetic light by revealing the source of their trauma, which will go a long way to explain their actions type of chapter, right? This is not that. It does contextualize and explain Amy's actions, but that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
And it's a chapter that is not a good look. You don't come out of this chapter sympathizing with Amy at all. Understanding her, sure. Pitying her, sympathizing with her, fuck no. So this chapter basically bucks our trend of interludes, right? Like, if you asked anyone what is the one thing that these books did, it would be, we get to an interlude and we have a character we hate, and then we read their interlude, and then by the end we're like, oh, I get you now. This says no. So the question here is why? The question is, why did we do it this way? Why is this book doing this way? And I think the answer to that question lies within this interlude itself. And I think it's a really interesting one. And I want to explore that as we go through it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I obviously have a ton to say about this, but yeah, let's get into it, and hopefully we'll pick it apart piece by piece.
Sure.
So Amy pauses before going through a door to meet someone, reflecting on how timid she is. She looks at her maimed fingers and her tattoos, commemorating her lowest point, and thinks that it still hurts every time she looks at it.
Yeah, and this is why I love this, because I think structurally what this chapter is doing is it is slowly ramping up to the full extent of Amy's awfulness. It's as if Wildbow understands what maybe the expectation is here, that maybe the expectation is that this chapter is going to give us a different point of view, a different angle on Amy that might make us see her in a more sympathetic light, or have a chance to win us over to her. And he doesn't reveal right away that this isn't going to be what this is. But there are hints here from the very beginning, right? Because on the surface, this moment of her looking at her hand and reminding herself of her lowest point seems to indicate like the pain of guilt and regret. These things, I feel guilty about what I've done. I regret what I've done. I'm acknowledging this bad thing I did, and I feel bad about it. It seems like that. It seems like that's what it's going to be. And you're like, okay, that's good. That's promising. But
yeah,
it's not really that, though.
No, it's not. And I love that you pointed that out, that, yeah, like we're almost, I mean, like you said, we've been conditioned to a degree. We're almost like, all right, Waldo, hit me with it. Like somehow turn shit into gold. I know you can do it. And so you're like, okay. She seems to be feeling remorse. That's interesting. We kind of didn't believe she was capable of it. And then like you said, it kind of turns out that it's not a kind of remorse that results in any improvement. It's more like a I feel bad about myself kind of regret. Right,
because even this is solely focused on herself, right? Yeah. This was my lowest point. It hurts me.
Yeah.
It is something that on the surface feels like, okay, that might be a good sign. But yeah, when you stare at it for more than a second, you're like, wait a minute. This is wholly focused on yourself. And it's a sign of things to come for sure.
Yeah, right. She muses that one time she approached Marquis with the theory that she got her anxiety and quiet nature from her biological mom, since she clearly didn't get it from Marquis or from the Dallins. And she seems to find quite a lot of value in this realization. It makes her more calm to think of this, to have this explanation for where this timid nature comes from. But Marquis fails to confirm it, which basically she takes as a negation. And it's like that robs her of this security that she somehow was gaining from this framing.
Yeah. And I think this is doing two very important things that continue throughout this entire chapter. So I want to take the time to really discuss and dive into these two biggest Amy characterizations that this reveals and that we'll see throughout. The first is this idea, this central idea that a character trait or action of hers belongs to one of her forebears and not herself, and how she uses that as a relief mechanism to any kind of blame. And we see this here in this moment, but we see it throughout the chapter. She's constantly comparing the actions that she's doing to Marquis, to Carol. When she does something that she sees a little shady, that's a Marquis thing. When she does something that's a little manipulative, that's a Carol thing. She blames her parents for the person she is and for the things that she did. And look, it is unquestionably true that who we are as people has a lot to do with the people that raised us, that created us, and that raised us. But Amy is taking that idea and releasing all personal responsibility from it and all necessary corrective action from it.
Right. Yeah. She's completely shirking the responsibility. It's just like,
yes.
And I mean, she makes certain choices with full awareness that like, oh yeah, this is kind of a Marquis thing to be doing that I'm doing right now. And it's like, okay, then don't fucking do it if it's an issue, right?
Right.
She does it anyway.
Yeah. And let's take a step back here, because the arc is called From Within. And in this very last chapter, we talked about, we had Victoria hit by this panic attack out of nowhere. It was an attack that was different, but also kind of connected to everything she's been through. And when Victoria looked around, she realized that this is all coming from within me. This is coming from within me, from within. I have the responsibility to look at that and to try to deal with it. It's mine to deal with. By contrast, Amy's version of this arc would be called From Without. None of this comes from within her. None of this is her fault. None of this is her responsibility. And she uses it like in this realization of this shyness, this timidity, this quietness. I think this isn't me. I got this from my mom, and therefore I don't have to worry about it. It's not mine. If I like you just said, if you don't like that about yourself, work towards changing it. Don't just say, "Oh, well, I understand where I got this from, and therefore I don't have to do anything about it." But that's what she does, and it's what she does constantly with every little thing throughout this chapter. This one little beat here sets up her actions for almost every other reasoning throughout this chapter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're forced to go back through things, right? And like the way the chapter starts, she's thinking about like, oh shit, I've always been surrounded by people who were so good at this. This being what, like the social thing, the cape thing. Yeah. And like we know from Victoria's point of view that Victoria works constantly to like sharpen and refine her poise, how she's perceived, how she's conveying herself. It's not automatic for her. It's a habit that she's taught herself. And Amy has this conception that like, oh, I'm just bad at this because I've never tried, because I am just this way, and it's not my fault. And it's so I mean, it's really quite infuriating, because I think we all know people who are like that. Like we may not know people who are as bad as Amy across the board, but I think we all know people who have this mode of being in the world where everything is someone else's fault. Right. And I think this is one of the reasons why people have reacted to Amy so, like, Jack Slash is worse than Amy. Okay. Yes. Do we agree? Jack Slash is worse than Amy as a human being, but Amy, it's so much easier to get viscerally riled up by Amy, because we all know somebody on that spectrum on the way to being Amy, right?
Yeah.
We don't know any Jack Slashes usually.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I think you and I were talking about earlier, and it's like alcoholism. Like we found that addiction is a genetic trait, right? Your likelihood to be addicted to something can be a genetic trait. And that doesn't mean, okay, so you're an alcoholic because your father was an alcoholic. Does that mean you don't have to do anything about that now? That you're released from all responsibility to try to make yourself get better? No, of course not. You still have to do stuff about it. Yes, you understand where it came from, and that helps you deal with it. But you have responsibility still, Amy.
Yeah.
But the second thing that I think this is almost as equally important is this ability for Amy's internal monologue to basically be pulling a constant Lisa in a way. Like, she always assumes the worst about what everyone is doing. Like in this moment, she asks a question to Marquis about her mother. He smiles. He doesn't say yes or no. He just smiles. And she immediately extrapolates out a complex reasoning for why what she just asked is not true. without any kind of support from that. And she might even be right in this one instance that her mother was not like this. Her reasoning behind this might actually be spot on. But this is what she does throughout the entire chapter, right? She is constantly reading in to everything people do, making assumptions about what they think about her based on body language, based on interpretations of what they're saying, based on all this kind of stuff. And it is always immediately the most victim creating interpretation for her, right? The thing that makes her seem the weakest, the thing that hurts her the most is what she assumes everyone else means by everything they say. Mm-hmm. That's reflected in her reaction to just a smile from Marquis here. And I think so this one little beat right here at the beginning has kind of set up these are the two big Amy characteristics, right? These are the two things that are going to carry through this entire Jessica conversation, and we kind of understand exactly why she's going to answer certain ways and respond certain ways to certain things.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different kind of threads of what's going on with Amy, and yeah, it's great to point out that these are actually set in this very subtle way before this conversation even starts, so that Wildbow can start kind of weaving with them rather than having to introduce them on the fly.
Yeah, and you might not even like be aware that one little story is setting up all that, but it just gets you in the mood, gets you in the mode of seeing how Amy processes information. So it all feels like it makes sense from a character perspective as we go through, and as it gets worse and worse and worse, and her interpretations are more cruel and more terrible.
Yep. So she enters the dimly lit massive space of the Warden's Lobby HQ back at the start of the story to meet Jessica Yamada.
Yeah, and like this is, I still think Wildbow's playing with us a bit here, and having us go, oh, so this is it. Like, this is the chapter where we feel bad for Amy, or we learn more about Amy, and we're going to do it through a therapy session, through Jessica Yamada. That makes sense. It makes sense that we be doing it this way. This is perfect. And I think he's playing off this a little bit. Of course, we know if we think about it for more than a minute, this occurs probably not directly, but soon after Yamada's conversation with Victoria, in which she says Amy is like the most dangerous person in the world and needs help. Yeah. And Jessica's probably like going to check up on that herself, right?
Exactly. Yep.
But I want to point at something in the mood of the atmosphere that Wildbow sets up here. Amy describes the space, the Warden's headquarters, as a space that looks like it was the twilight of earliest morning or cusp of evening. So it's this in between, right? It's either right before sunrise or right before sunset, almost as if we're putting this character in this moment, right, where she could go either way. That there's still a chance in the months ago version of Amy for her to go the right way, for her to go the way of not darkness, of light, although we invert those all the time, so don't pay attention to that. But you know what I mean. Right. Like she's at this, the mood, the setting of this place is at this hour of change, and it could go one way or the other. And we know where it's going to go. But I love it as this setup of this mood of this place. I love that.
Yeah, I adore that. Yeah, the atmosphere of this place, it actually feels very different than I remember it feeling to Victoria, which probably means, well, it probably does feel different to Victoria. I think Amy literally feels things differently than other people because she sees the world as being this dark place, basically. So Amy offers her hand to shake as a kind of weirdly half-assed power move, which she immediately apologizes for and retracts. So throughout this conversation, Amy is hyper conscious of how she is being seen. How should she stand? Where should she stand? Where should she put her hands? Are those women over there looking at me? It's a thread that runs throughout the conversation.
Yeah. Everything is calculated because everyone is constantly judging everything you do or say. And it's never positive judgment, right? It's always negative. It's always they're going to judge me harshly because of the way I stand or where I put my hands or what I do this. And later she says she had no idea if she was being manipulated. She didn't have the skill set to even begin figuring it out or to know what to do if she'd been able to put her finger on it. So like Jessica is kind of here. I mean, Jessica's doing a little bit of manipulation, right? In the classic therapy sense of manipulation, right? Where you're using different techniques to try to get someone to open up to you. But it's not like manipulation meant to deceive or hurt you. But she's not even aware enough of that. She's just like, this is probably manipulation. And she's so busy playing this game of like where you stand or power moves or different things that she can't like listen. Like just listen.
I mean, I'm really fascinated by this element of her kind of hyper awareness of the context, because Victoria isn't completely dissimilar. You can see echoes of the Carol cultivation here, except the difference being that Victoria's consciousness of appearances is channeled through a kind of proactive mentality that like, I'm going to control how I appear. I'm going to make sure that my makeup looks right, like my hair looks okay, my clothes look good. I have fashion sense, which I work on and spend effort on. I pay attention to how I stand to project leadership qualities. All of these things are things we know Victoria thinks about, does on purpose, takes an active role in. Amy is almost just like, she's a victim of everything. She's a victim of where her hands are, as if they're not her hands and she can't control them.
I love that.
And it's just as a contrast, it's almost maddening, right? Just the degree to which she refuses to take control or responsibility for anything.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I love that comparison that, like both of them are taking the same kind of pressure from Carol, but their reaction to that is entirely different. Yeah. One is active and one is passive. One is woe is me and one is, I got to do something about this.
And if we're going to blame Carol for this, then you could say, Carol kind of fucked her up here, because Carol has installed all of this hyper awareness of how she's being perceived without really teaching her how to channel and control it the way Victoria is able to. I don't know whether we should really blame Carol for that, like 100%. I don't know how to blame. I don't know. This whole chapter and this whole idea gives me, like, it leads me to be very confused about the role of blame, because like at a certain point it's like, I mean, maybe Carol did do all of this to you. Maybe Carol's 100% responsible for all of your problems.
Sure.
Okay, now what?
Now what? Yeah, exactly. Now what? So like, it's like, it's great that you've come to realize that. I think that's an important first step in dealing with your problems, but that doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem to point at your mom and say, okay, it was your fault. Okay. So now,
right.
Yeah. And I mean, like Victoria, to compare again, acknowledges that a lot of her issues come from her mother, and she's actively trying to do something about it. She is, and she doesn't always succeed, and sometimes she makes bad choices, like, for example, charging blindly and punching a rock really hard that might end the world. Not a great look, but she's active. She's doing something. Where Amy's response seems to be like, woe is me, my mom did this to me, there's nothing I can do, no one will give me a chance, and it's all their fault, and it's just completely passive, and it sucks.
Yeah. So Jessica opens up the conversation, asking that the terms of their interaction be that of collaboration between colleagues.
Which is kind of bullshit, because, like, I think she's framing it in this way specifically to not set off Amy, but she's treating this like it's a therapy session, right? Like, she starts the conversation with which name would you like to go by, which is Jessica's tried and true first statement of beginning of a therapy session, right? That's been encoded into our heads at what Jessica does at the beginning of sessions. Mm-hmm. So I think that's supposed to indicate this colleague thing is more of a, I don't want to call it a manipulation technique because that has a negative connotation, but a tactic to get Amy to open up, to say, we're colleagues. I'm approaching you on your level, not on authority level.
Right. You know, when it's manipulation I approve of, I prefer to call it leadership. So yes,
we've had this conversation before.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I love that. I honestly, I forgot that was the way that Jessica opens up her conversations with patients. She's giving her the opportunity to define herself. That's fucking perfect, actually, because like she's giving Amy the opportunity, like, tell me who you are, define yourself.
Yeah.
And Amy's like, I don't know. Amy, I guess.
Right, like Amy's immediate answer is to not answer the question literally, is to not say, well, here's who I think I am. It's to say, okay, who does she want me to say in who does she want me to be to answer this question, which is just gamifying the conversation again, right? It's not actually being truthful. It's not actually being honest. It's just trying to win.
Yep.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Fucking Amy.
Yep. So I just enjoy this bit dropped in here where Amy's like, yeah, I could single-handedly beat the machine army, but they won't let me.
Yeah, weird flex, Amy, but okay.
Yeah, right. And then Amy confesses that she's dating who we can surmise is Bianca.
Well, that fucking explains a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Holy shit! When I put that together, my brain exploded. It makes you now understand kind of why Goddess was not using her power on Amy during that whole thing. It also kind of paints the way that went down as like really fucked up.
Somehow even more fucked up than it already was. Yeah.
Yeah. Like she had her monster friend Chris kill her girlfriend and then like assumed her role of power. It's like,
and
fucking A, Amy.
And somehow got out of this entirely like without feeling like she was responsible for any part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Stunning.
But she is bringing this up as a way to explain this feeling of numbness, right? Her work, her dating life, she feels nothing. She's unsatisfied. She's not happy. And like, look, man, like that happens sometimes. Like you just get depressed or you're going through some shit and like you just lose a little feeling like you're not experiencing joy in the way you were before, but like you do something about it.
Right.
You go see someone or you get medicated. Like you react to it in a way and not just say, well, no, the only thing that made me happy ever was Victoria. So that's the only thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, the cure for your anhedonia is not the thing that you imagine that it will be. Like that's never never actually how that works. And I'm going to jump around between a couple of different parts in the chapter here, but like,
sure.
I think it's interesting that she has this narrative where like, I've tried to date other people and the one thing that she never talks about is like having friends. She only has her family who sucks and who she doesn't like and doesn't trust and doesn't get any real support from, or at least doesn't feel any support from, even if they're giving her support. And then she has a few people she's tried to date, which have not been successful.
Yeah.
But it seems like she's never had any friends. And that's like a huge problem.
Sure.
Right? Like what are you even doing trying to date people if you can't even have like a normal human friendship with another person?
Matt, nobody will be friends with her.
I mean, that's true, but like
no, it's not. I mean, it's true in the sense that in her mind, it like she's just gonna like sit at home and say, "Why isn't anybody friends with me?"
Well, no one will be friends with her because she's a fucking drag. But like that's because she refuses to do anything for herself, right? Yeah. That's I don't know. This is something. It's interesting because it's almost like I noticed it due to its absence.
Sure.
The absence of just she has no friends. Like, I mean, Taylor was like the most, comically lonely person in the world. She had friends. Like she always had friends in all the different phases of her life. It was important to her. Victoria obviously does too.
I think having friends, having an actual support system would go against her kind of victim complex, right? Because I don't have friends, and then the reason I don't have friends becomes part of my victimhood. It's fucking bullshit.
Exactly.
Oh God, yeah.
So I think my favorite bit of the whole chapter is when she talks about going to the birdcage, and Jessica says going to the birdcage could have been a permanent transition. They shouldn't have let me demand to go there, she said, quiet.
You literally threatened to release a virus that would kill millions of people if they didn't let you go in the birdcage. And your response now is, well, they shouldn't have let me. I like the detail there, though. It's not they shouldn't have let me go there. They shouldn't have let me demand to go there. They should not have let me make a demand. Like, that is so absurd.
The backflips are just so impressive.
Yeah.
That's why it's my favorite. Is it's just like you can't even say that out loud and not notice that it's stupid. But she manages
stupid.
it. Yeah.
And she is convinced that is right.
Yeah.
That like I just it's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth saying that like we're never does this cross the line into being unbelievable. Like this is writing, this is fiction.
Sure.
We're saying it's absurd, but never does it cross that line into actually being absurd in the sense of triggering disbelief. You're just like, God, fuck her, you know?
Right.
But you buy it. You're in the story. I think that's worth pointing out.
I do think this is an important moment too. We've been kind of jumping around. I think we've kind of slowly been coming to a realization that Amy, this isn't going to go the way we think. But this is really the moment for me that I fully came to realize just how bad it was going to be, right? Because this is such an absurd statement. It is such an insane, absurd thing to say that you're like, oh, so this is the way that's going to go. Okay. And then from here, we really dive into the truly reprehensible, monstrous stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So eventually Amy can't stand the strain of not talking about Victoria for 5 seconds and pulls the conversation to that topic. And she talks about how dating Bianca is just not satisfying enough. And she just really needs to be with Victoria.
And I love how this is presented because Jessica basically says, look, Victoria has decided that she doesn't want any contact with you. And if you care about her well-being as much as you say you do, you should do the same thing. You should maintain a similar distance and non-contact. Amy's response is, you asked about my dating life earlier. As a colleague, I did. But as a colleague, I'm hoping you'll at least acknowledge what I said first. I will, but let me say my stuff first. Please note that she does not actually get back to acknowledging what Jessica said. Jessica forces her to. Basically, she keeps bringing it up again and again until she forces Amy to acknowledge it, which is awful. Mm-hmm. But the gist here is I'm numb. I don't feel anything. And the only way I'll ever not be numb is to be around Victoria again. And nothing else in the world is going to make me happy. And it's not fair that I don't get to be happy. Ergo, I should get to be around Victoria. I should be forgiven. I should get to be happy again. And look, I think there should be a path to recovery for people where you might get to experience happiness again, even after you do truly terrible, reprehensive stuff. I think that's a true statement. But the connection here is the only way that's going to happen is if I'm around this one person. I've made that decision, and because I know this to be true, everyone else better listen to me, or else.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's a weird. There's a lot of doublethink throughout
sure.
Pretty much everything about Amy, where it's almost like that or else is something where it's almost like she comes to the edge of saying it, but instead of saying that, she goes on this lengthy thing about how, do you know how bad I could be?
Right.
And she like, it's a weird like again, like she's talking out of both sides of her mouth, because she's like, oh, I would never actually threaten you, because that would be really bad. Obviously, even I can see that would be bad for me to threaten you.
Yep.
But I'm definitely going to talk about how threatening I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think she comes too close to just causing this whole internal house of cards to crumble, though, because like when she says right here, I don't want to take time, Amy said, a little bit emotional now. I don't want to work from 9 until 9 every day, and I don't want to work from 9 to 5 or 9 until noon either, with half my day or my evenings spent on dates. Well, hey, Amy, I don't want to work from 9 to 5 either, but like, shit's tough.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. We all have things that we don't want to have to do that we still have to do. I don't know. I'm not sure why that's supposed to be a compelling argument. I mean, I get on an emotional level, like I can inhabit my like toddler self and feel resentment at the fact that I don't get everything that I want immediately.
Sure.
But then I remember that I'm not a toddler.
Yeah. So it's called being an adult, where you realize that sometimes to get what you want, you might have to do things you don't particularly like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you never get what you actually want. Maybe you get some things that you want.
Sure.
Maybe the things that you want are stupid.
Yeah. Or maybe the things that you want you can't get anymore because there are consequences to your actions.
Yeah.
Like, you can be forgiven for the thing you did, and that doesn't mean you get to date your sister again. Or again, for at all.
Yeah.
It's fucking ridiculous. It's an absurd thing to think that forgiveness in this mindset is being with my sister again. Like, no, that's not how that works. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. But she's so screwed up, though. It's really incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we come to some pretty important stuff where she has an opportunity to address what she did to Victoria. And the text says, Amy tensed, fists balling up, tattoos tight around her bones. I wasn't me. I was fresh off having my fingers eaten, my home destroyed, my life overturned. Bonesaw tried to break me. She tried to break Mark. I wasn't me. Victoria wasn't Victoria. Jessica didn't interject. What we did together doesn't count. Amy's words were more a plea than a statement. Not when we weren't ourselves.
This is the moment, Matt. This is the point of no return. Absolutely throw my... If I was reading this in a book, I'd throw the book across the room. What we did together. What we did together. Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off. It's such a wonderfully constructed, terrible, awful thing to say.
And not just say, but it's just a perfect window into like, oh, this is what she tells herself. This is her story.
This.
Yeah.
Yeah. She absolutely believes this. Fundamentally, I love that Amy's words were a plea. Like, I think a part of her knows this is bullshit, right? Like, a part of her recognizes that this is total bullshit, but she can't accept it. It's too ingrained within how she is allowing herself to survive, how she is dealing with what she did, that she's built this narrative. And if that comes crumbling down, she loses everything. So she's desperate, not only desperate to believe it herself, but desperate for other people to tell her she's right. Tell her that, yes, you are right, that this didn't count. It didn't count. You're right. You weren't yourself. You went through this horrible stuff. And look, she did go through some shitty stuff, right? Like everything she's saying here, Bonesaw did try to break her and Mark. Bonesaw, she did have her fingers eaten, her home destroyed, her life overturned. That's all true. It doesn't excuse what you did, and it doesn't remove you from responsibility.
Yeah. I think before the end of this conversation, we're going to dip into this idea of good person, bad person.
Yeah.
This framework. And this is, I think, one of those examples where she just cannot abide any stain on her kind of self-image of I am a good person. And if there is something that she has done, some bit of like evidence in the world that contradicts the I am a good person narrative, then she has to do whatever gymnastics necessary to transmute that into something that just doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean what everyone says it means. It's not, that doesn't count. She literally says doesn't count.
Yeah.
So
I could not believe that. Like, I thought she was going to rationalize it away in an unspoken kind of way, but to have her literally say what she did doesn't count was the most shocking moment in this chapter for me. Like, I did not think even she was that had that lack of self-awareness to literally say the words it didn't count and believe it. Fuck off.
Right. I mean, it's kind of amazing Jessica's able to tolerate this.
Yeah, I mean, she's just like listening silently. I love kind of imagining what Jessica's going through in this moment, because like it's got to be like, oh,
wow.
fuck.
Yeah.
This is worse than I thought.
Right.
I wonder, like, I don't think we ever specifically see Jessica's response to this conversation or the actions she takes, and I wonder what those are. Yeah.
No, I think we do not see what action she. I mean, I almost think that she just keeps her word and she does very little in response to this because really it's not like Amy threatened anything, or like all she did was demonstrate herself to be terrible.
She kind of beats Jessica into silence almost by the end of this conversation, which is like the most depressing part about it.
It's true. So Jessica's response to this little dodge is basically say, you can solve your crippling loneliness by reaching out to the people in your life who care about you and maybe working on making some other relationships with other humans. And you can also deal with your other obvious problems that are very apparent with therapy. And Amy's response is to be offended that Jessica thinks she's crazy.
You gotta feel for Jessica in this moment.
Yeah.
Like, she's not my favorite person in the story. She's made some mistakes that we've talked about in the past, but she's really trying here.
Yeah.
And it's just, she's not listening at all. And this therapy is for crazy people, and I'm not crazy. This is the most like dated boomer bullshit nonsense I've ever heard. It's stupid. It's just stupid and objectively wrong. And I don't even know where she got that. Like, is that a, I mean, it doesn't matter where she got it, but is that a Carolism? I don't think so. I guess it kind of is, because Carol kind of rejected therapy.
Yeah, I think so. I think Carol views all of that as crossing some of her idiosyncratic boundaries of being totally in control all the time.
Yeah.
She can't admit that anyone else can tell her what to do. So yeah, I think that's probably it.
But again, sins of the father, mother, like Victoria has gotten over that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, through a circuitous route of being in an asylum for a while. But yeah, she totally has credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this swear moment, though.
Yeah.
I think this is really important.
Yeah.
Because Amy is basically saying, I'm not crazy, really. I'm lonely. I had a bad day years ago. I freaked out and I wasn't myself for a while. Now nobody's willing to forgive me, even people I don't know. And the most fucked up thing about it, excuse me, I shouldn't swear in here. I like this is really interesting because I mean, not only is this a fun connection to Riley, who she's been spending a lot of time with, so maybe the no swearing thing has caught on a little bit, but it's also, like, to me, a good demonstration of Amy's really fucked up understanding of appropriate and inappropriate in a kind of childish way, where swear words bad, not taking responsibility for the rape you did, fine thing to say in this place, but dirty word, bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just like this really fucked up, horrible way of viewing things.
Yeah. Well, I see that as being part of the good person, bad person thing, where it's like,
Sure.
oh, no. If I speak in a way that is uncouth or reveals a lack of inner control, people are going to think that I fall into that terrible bad person category.
Yeah.
And so I need to make sure that, it's the same instinct toward managing how she's being perceived, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So from about this point till pretty much the end of the conversation, Amy keeps hitting this inner refrain that Jessica isn't listening to her because Jessica isn't agreeing with her. And at one point, Jessica says, "I believe you," which wins a ton of points with Amy.
I mean, it kind of does. Her response to it is people should be saying this to me more.
True.
Which is kind of fucked up in its own way.
Yeah.
I really like how the conversation here, like, takes a segue to talking about heroes, where Amy has this opinion about people that are heroes, not just the people that wear capes, doctors, nurses, therapists, even people without powers. They are heroes as well. And it kind of lulls you into this false sense of, oh, okay. Because I think I agree with that. I agree that there are people that should be called heroes out there that are just regular people doing their job, trying to help people, and we should call them heroes. And I'm like, Amy, you're right about something. And then she goes, you'd think heroes, powers or not, would be more forgiving. And you're just like, fuck. You were so close.
Yeah.
You were so close to something.
Yeah. Oh, maybe she's not 100% garbage. Oh.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
And look, this idea of forgiveness, we've talked so much about forgiveness already in this book, and I'm sure we're going to have so much more to say about it before this thing is over. But this opinion that no one is forgiving her for what she did is absurd. Because here's the thing. Everybody's forgiven her, except for one person. Her parents are inviting her to a barbecue. She's in Warden's headquarters right now, helping them, right? Like, she is responsible she's been given a lot of responsibility. She's not in jail. Society has basically said, okay.
Yeah.
There's one person who hasn't forgiven her. One person. And that's the only person that matters to her. So just because Victoria is still processing and still dealing with the things and has not reached a point of forgiveness and might never, that means that nobody is forgiving her. And it's just absurd. It's just absurd to me. Like, society has said, you did a bad thing. Okay, we're moving on.
Yeah.
we're going to try to move on. And like, what more do you want?
Well,
and of course the thing is, I want Victoria
Well,
to say, I forgive you.
and not only that, I think she wants them to not just say, we're giving you a second chance. She wants them to say, actually, we were wrong and what you did wasn't bad.
Sure. Yeah.
Because like she knows that her family like judges her, but they're giving her the full second chance. They want her around. They want her to be part of their lives, but they think it's kind of fucked up what she did. She wants them to literally think that what she did was fine because she can't stand for people to not think well of her.
Yeah, and that's not forgiveness. That's not what forgiveness is.
Yeah.
At all.
No. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
In fact, part of that is recognizing that the thing was bad. That is key step one in forgiveness.
Yeah, in earning it and giving it. Yeah. So yeah, she really, really wants to talk about Victoria. And because Jessica refuses to converse about it, Amy just monologues at her about it. So first she explains how fucked up the Dallins are, which she's not wrong about.
Nope.
She put massive pressure on both her and Victoria, which even Victoria rarely really kind of looks at directly, except I mean, I think this arc is one of the few where she's thought explicitly about her mom a lot. Yeah. Oh, also Gallant is just super bad for her, apparently.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, a lot of this is right. I'm not sure I agree with the she never actually loved Gallant thing. I am willing to bet that the relationship was a whole lot more complicated than Victoria lets on, but we've had that conversation many times before. But a lot of these things are true. And that doesn't, like, the thing is, Amy has constructed this narrative, right? That, like, Victoria is the way she is because of Carol. It's all Carol's fault. And it is absolutely true that a lot of what Victoria is suffering through is because of Carol. But Amy, you're leaving off a person that did a thing. And it was a really bad thing. And it really affected her. Yeah. It's like, yeah, this is all Carol's doing. It's Carol's fault that she's this way. And of course, as you said, it ties into this understanding of her that we weren't the ones that actually did this. I didn't do this. I didn't do it to Victoria. That wasn't Victoria. That wasn't me. And the reason it was because of Carol. The reason was because of Bonesaw. The reason was because of Mark. Over and over again, it's these other people doing these other things. So when building a narrative about who her sister is and what her sister is going through, what she did can't enter into that equation at all because it was not us. It was them. It was them.
Yeah, right. I mean, she's couldn't have said it better, right? Like she's giving Jessica this like cross section of all the influence in Victoria's life and acting like she wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't this massive enabler even before the horrible stuff she did. She was this massive enabling force in Victoria's life, pushing her, permitting her to be the violent glory girl, right?
Yeah. And she has the audacity to talk about Victoria and say she's stagnant, she's not growing, and it's because of this anger she's carrying, and she needs to do better and needs to focus on better things and be a hero not for anger or revenge but for other things. And I'm like, fuck, like pot kettle.
Yeah.
And I look, some of that is true. Like it is absolutely true that Victoria for a long time was kind of stuck and she's trying to work towards it. But like the idea that you, Amy, can dictate the proper behavior for Victoria Dallin is absurd.
Yeah. Right. I mean, pot kettle, she's a complete lack of self-awareness and complete lack of understanding that like, hey, you can get better without getting this one thing that you're fixated on and obsessed with. I mean, I think it's literal obsession.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think this, we can revisit this idea that she has this particular line that she goes back to over and over again. I'm a good person. Look at all the good stuff I do. Also, if I were a bad person, look at all the bad things I could do. But I refrain from doing those things. Therefore, logically, I'm a good person. QED. And like it is crucial to her to maintain and defend this good person, bad person. It's like it's this magic talisman that she uses to ward off any feelings of guilt or inadequacy or failure whatsoever.
Yeah, I think Victoria talked about that Amy sometimes latches onto things and she latches onto ideals and she'll just repeat them over and over again to hold on to that. And that is absolutely what she's doing here with this concept of good person, bad person. This purely black and white binary existence where if not bad, must be good. And it's just nonsense.
It's interesting to watch, to step back from this conversation and watch how she kind of pirouettes around being pinned down and reflect on how Victoria, back when they were confronting each other on Sheen, was like, you have to nail her to the ground, rhetorically, and hammer her on the points where she's weak over and over until she can't like dodge out of seeing the truth of it. And Jessica can't do that here because, number one, this isn't even a real therapy session, and even if it were, it's just not a context where Jessica can really hammer her on anything. She would just leave. So,
And I mean, like, I think the fascinating thing about this conversation and how it's written is kind of this idea that I think from Amy's mind, like, they're two people playing chess against each other, and Amy is just like dominating. But I don't think Jessica's trying to do that much manipulation, especially at this point in the conversation where she's really just stopped saying anything and is just giving Amy the rope to hang herself on. Like, Amy is just continually making this worse and worse and worse, and Jessica's just like being silent or just saying, well, no, not like that, or just not even really, like, there's no chess going on here. It's just Jessica listening and allowing Amy to dig her hole.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's terrible.
Yep.
I love, but we're reaching the end of the conversation, right? Yeah. And Jessica, now having listened to all this, is like her last big pitch where she's like, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of these points. There's no color in your life. Your days are rote and directionless. You have no connection. You have connections to family, but you consider yourself alone, and you want this connection to Victoria very, very much. That's what I said. It seems like a recipe for problems. No, listen, it's cherry picked from what I said, but it's absolutely missing the heart of what I'm trying to say. What? What
I'm trying to say is she owes me love.
Yeah.
And then following that, Jessica tries to get her to say, hey, will you at least tell me that you'll stay away from her? And she's like, yeah, but I'm totally gonna say goodbye to her if I have to. So no.
Yes, but if she calls, I'll go to her, and I reserve the right to say goodbye. What does that mean? What do you mean you reserve? Like, as if you have the authority to grant yourself that right?
Right.
What are you talking about? Like, yes, I'll stay away from her until it comes time for me to say goodbye, and then I definitely won't. Which, of course, we know is exactly what happens. She fucking gets her all goddessed because of that bullshit.
Yeah. I do love the weasel language of saying I reserve the right, because it's like, well, you don't have it. You can't reserve it.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Yes, I'd like to reserve that library book.
What you're saying is you're going to violate the boundary.
Yeah.
If X condition is met. Okay, well, good to know that, I guess.
Yeah, and X condition is entirely in my hands.
Yeah.
Like, it's not
right.
Like, if she calls, I'll go to her is at least like you can say, okay, I'll wait till she contacts me. Yeah. But then the second one is, and whenever I feel like it, I'm going to decide to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Awesome.
Yep. And
Great.
then she wraps up this really nice conversation using the invasive insights gleaned from her power to broadside Jessica's mental state in a way that makes her tear up and probably sets into motion a chain of events that lead to her life being destroyed.
Yep.
This is all framed as being from a place of compassion, but
yeah, and pardon my connection tissue here, but she is violating her.
Yeah,
she is raping her in a way, and Jessica is saying, like, she's basically saying no, like I consider this a violation. Stop what you're doing. What you did was wrong, and continuing to bring this out is wrong. And she's not listening. I mean, like this idea that I did this one terrible thing a couple of years ago. I had one bad day and did a thing. You're doing it in a different way right now. You are violating this person's privacy. You are violating the inner workings of this person, and she is telling you to stop, and you are not listening.
Yeah.
You are not listening.
It's just an incredible lack of empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and it is, like you said, it is not outright threatening, but it is also using a kind of passive language that comes off as threats. So it's like she's not saying that I can consider this a warning. Jessica is what she's saying. You're gonna break. Consider this a warning. And it's such double speak language. It's so awful and terrible and mean. It is truly reprehensible. Like everything she said in this conversation is bad, but it's been bad in like a very like not direct way. Like she's not saying this stuff to Victoria. She's just thinking it out loud. But this is when she's actually taking direct action against another human being in a horribly cruel way. I hate it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I remember one of the previous times where we had an Amy heavy discussion, I was like, oh, she's dumb. Her problem is she's dumb. And I'm like, now I'm like, well, no, not really.
Yeah.
That's giving her too much credit. Actually, she's very deliberate in her kind of double thinky manipulativeness and very intelligent even in her mental gymnastics.
Yeah,
that the degrees she'll go to avoid having to look her actions in the face.
Sure will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And she leaves this section acknowledging that she didn't much feel like a good person, which is like the closest she gets to any kind of actual realization. But
true.
Not that it'll stop her actions at all, of course.
Right. Yeah. For she felt bad for like 2 minutes, and then she figured out a way out of that.
Yeah.
So we skip to now with Amy trying yet again to restore Hunter's condition. It's delicate work, and Marquis is there to be completely unhelpful. He leaves, and Mark comes over to add his pile of neuroses to what's going on. It's actually hard to put my finger on like why Mark's interaction here feels so off. I think it's because he's like dragging Amy through this painful childhood memory that she clearly finds upsetting, and he just finds funny. And then he like mentions Victoria 17 times without prompting, and it's like, what's with this fucking moron? Like he's less helpful than Marquis is in this situation.
Yeah, I think he feels like just entirely clueless to me. Like, yeah, it feels like he's just this person that's kind of in this state of shock, like and disbelief about what's going down. Like he's focusing on these memories of Amy that he sees as good memories. He probably doesn't have very many Amy memories because he doesn't seem a person who is that involved in parenting at all, let alone with the kid that they really didn't like. So he's just reliving these memories and is completely ignorant to the fact that they're hurting her because she only interprets the negative. Like he's just saying, oh, this one funny time when you cried when I got your haircut, which is something I think like, I don't know. I have conversations with my parents where they talk about, yeah, there was this one time where you were a little shit. And my interpretation is not, I get it, I'm terrible.
Right.
It's just like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that funny when I was a kid. But of course, Amy takes the worst possible one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like there is an interpretation here where we see that he's been trying to get her to agree to fix his brain, and she keeps telling him no. And maybe there's like this specific attempt to highlight how incredible she is. Like in this moment, like he says, Victoria was a terror. You were the good one. Mm-hmm. And she says, you're buttering me up, but maybe there is truth to that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
it does seem weird.
It's just weird that he'd bring up Victoria like with her. It like you said, indicates that he just has no idea what's going on and has just been completely blind to all of the shit that's gone on between the two of them.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, and I want to kind of focus back on setting again, because we had this wonderful setting in the last conversation where we talked about, twilight or early morning and this chance of going good or bad. And I think the end of that conversation was absolutely going bad. The helping hand that Jessica offered was soundly rejected, and she's heading down this path of darkness and terribleness. And so we cut from the scene of the light about to change. There's these giant statues of these huge heroes, like some of the most heroic people that ever existed. And now in scene number 2, she's in this dark room operating on these people, and who she's surrounded by: Chris, Marquis, Dot, who's all people like joking around and talking about death and casually as if they have no moral compass. Mark, who seems to be who's not even aware of what's going on and is maybe just sticking around because he's hoping for a little bit of that Amy brain magic. And so like we've moved from this place of maybe the representative of heroism into the extreme to here. And it's just so that was a moment of deciding. That was a deciding moment, a moment of choice. Amy made that choice. Now we move to now, and this is where she is. And
yeah,
hooray!
Right. This is one of the things that kind of highlighted for me that idea that she has no friends because she's surrounded by people. Right. She's not alone.
Yeah.
It's just that all these people suck, and like she doesn't see them as supporting her, even though she has two fathers here. She basically has to, it's like they're just annoying distractions, and they're genuinely not being helpful. Like it's not even her being dumb that makes her think they suck. They actually just suck. They're not helping.
Yeah,
and
at all.
Then she's got her shoulder devil, and then she's got Chris, who's just his whole own bag of garbage. And so yeah, it's where's your friends, Amy?
Yeah.
So yeah.
You rejected the person that genuinely cared about you to surround yourself with these people.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right,
Good job.
right.
One of the things I noticed that stuck out to me on a second read of this section is there's this quick double beat between these two sections of Amy talking about how the stakes are higher. In the first, she's about to walk into the conversation with Jessica, and she says this wasn't quite like usual. The stakes were higher. So she's labeling that conversation as higher stakes. Then she says it again here when operating on Hunter with her father around, knowing the parallels to Victoria. She said no, and he wasn't happy about it. He was less happy about Hunter given the parallels to Victoria's, which meant the stakes were higher. And it seems like she's constructing this image in which the stakes are always higher. And therefore it requires her to like be on her game in a way that is specifically horrible. I just found that double beat of that interesting.
Well, especially when it's Victoria adjacent, like anything Victoria, sure. Like the stakes here are, Victoria's going to think ill of me if I fuck this up, and she's going to forgive me and be with me if I do a really good job on this. Is the story she tells herself?
Yep. So I like that stakes equal Victoria. So the only time there are actual stakes in anything is when it's dealing with Victoria. And that kind of shows how she makes her choices, right?
Yeah, right.
And
I mean, nothing means
terrible.
anything to her except for that, which,
yeah.
I mean, if we can cultivate any pity for her, it's like the idea that you're so obsessed with someone that you literally don't care about anything else. That sucks. Like that would suck to be in that state.
Sure.
If you find yourself in that state, try to get out of it. Don't try to get that person. That's the wrong move. But yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, I agree with you though. That idea that would be awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
So her healing of Hunter fails, and she goes all mince-made, almost skewering Amy. At least Mark can be useful in saving her from actual death.
Hooray! Thanks, Mark. Glad you saved Amy.
Good job, buddy. Yeah.
But I mean, I think the important thing here is that we see her attempts to heal Hunter, to fix Hunter, are not working, right? She's still not acting like herself. This preoccupation with masks that we see Hunter talk about seems to indicate that shard bleed through. And Amy is not fixing her. And she admits in this moment, I might not be able to do it, which is very different from what she pledged to Victoria, right?
Yeah.
Hey, remember in the good old days when she agreed to give it like one last attempt and then come to Earth Gimel and submit herself to the authorities in exchange for like a conversation? Remember when she did that?
She doesn't.
Those were the good old days.
Oh man. No, I literally forgot she agreed to that because it's so far from her mind and absolutely not something that she would ever do.
Doesn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't count.
Right.
It didn't count.
I mean, even at the time, I wonder if there was any part of her that believed that, or if it was just like, whatever I have to say, here, more words out of my mouth to make you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think she totally did, because she thought that as soon as I say these words out of my mouth, she'll understand, and that won't be necessary anymore.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll just go fix Hunter, which will be easy because
Yep.
I think she may have actually believed that. I think she's still not clued into the fact that her power hates restoring things and only likes making new things.
Yep.
That's kind of how I view it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn from Chris that Teacher is out of the running. His thralls are all released. Breakthrough is in, whatever that means. Chris wants to use this to justify accelerating his plans for his production facility, and she concedes.
Yeah, but she concedes, acknowledging that this doesn't seem like the move a good person would make, right?
Yeah.
She's built up this narrative, this good person, bad person narrative, and says, this is not a move that a good person would make. But then she does it anyway. And she's talking about how this whole goal of hers is to preserve the good and healthy parts of humanity, but she admits that she's not even sure she believes that she knows what those concepts mean anymore. But she does it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, we know her. We know that she's going to do it anyway, and then she's going to find a way in which it was a move a good person would have made, even if it results in terrible consequences. Chris shouldn't have pushed her. Chris shouldn't have put all that pressure on her, and it's not her fault. It's really interesting to contrast this good person, bad person kind of mantra, if you will. Okay, that's not really what it is, but it's a framing, and I like to contrast it with Victoria's way of navigating morality, because she also needs her own system to help her figure out how to make the right choice.
Sure.
And Amy she didn't really, as far as we know, choose this system. This is just how she sees the world. And it isn't serving her, obviously. So it's just an interesting contrast between the two characters. They each have their own way of navigating moral questions. It's just that Amy's is terrible.
Yeah, yeah. So as we conclude this whole thing, I want to talk about how, like, when I first read this chapter, I didn't like that we have kind of this now coda on the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I know that 16.z is another Amy chapter. Like, I'm plugged into the fan base enough to know. I haven't read it, but I know it is another Amy chapter. And I thought it would be really good structurally to see months ago in one chapter and now in a second chapter. But the more I thought about it, the more I like this. Because I think at the beginning of this chapter, in months ago, there was still hope for Amy. Right. Even with all her externalizing, even with all her failing to acknowledge what she did and failure to take responsibility for it, and all these things that she's put in the way of her progress, there was still hope. There was an olive branch. There was a hand reached out by Jessica there. And if she had just grabbed it in that moment, that there was a chance forward for her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was there. And we see in that is rejected. Then we move to now, and we see the end of the road that she chose. The end of she rejected the help, and she went down this road. And now, here at the end of this road, in the now, she's talking about good and bad people. She's admitting that she doesn't even have a good understanding of what good and healthy mean anymore, but she's still making decisions based off of that idea. And they're bad decisions. They're wrong decisions. And so at the end of this chapter, it seems like there's nothing left in Amy anymore. There's nothing left in Amy but the bad person, but the monster. And so this idea that why was this journey? We saw the person who maybe had some hope. Here's in the now, there's no more hope. And now in chapter Z, we get to see what exactly this monster is capable of. And that's what I think the structure is going to be. And with that in mind, I love this coda now. I love that we jumped forward to now just so we can cap this one chapter of maybe possibly hope off with nope, none. Sorry. Now let's see how bad it's going to get.
Yeah, I like that framing. Awesome. Can't wait to see. Can't wait to talk about the next chapter.
You've read it already.
Of course I have. Of course I have, Scott. All right, that wraps up these 3 chapters. No discussion question this week because we are going to be doing another 3 chapter next week.
Yeah.
We're just not going to have time.
Yeah. This chapter went really over, and next is going to go over as well. So, no discussion question. There will be a new one next week, though.
Yeah, but just feel free to discuss, reply to things that we have said in the thread, and we just talk about that. And so that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You could reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com, or over on our Twitter account @gotwormpod. I will start doing live readings again this week. I did one for Y, but I didn't do one for the other channels, but I'll start doing those again. And of course, my personal Twitter is @ScottDaily85, and Matt's is @Mordina. Amy did nothing wrong.
God.
I can't believe that's your Twitter, Matt. That's Jesus.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And of course, you can find this and all the shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find this month's edition of the book club, in which Matt and Elliot talked about The Black Company. I didn't get to participate in that one because I was sleeping.
But it was
recovering from my film festival.
It was a good conversation. We figured out some stuff. It was a really interesting book. It's doing a lot of interesting things, and I enjoyed that conversation. So check that out. Also, I was on the last episode. No, not the last episode. I was on the
2 weeks
ago episode of Do the Right Thing. The Writing
I listened to that
podcast.
I listened to that in between movies at the film festival.
Oh, thank you.
It was a good story, Matt.
I appreciate that. So yeah, that's what's been going on. And yeah, cool. So if you like any of these shows and you want to support them, please consider donating at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses, like voting in our quarterly fan art contest, like the vote that's about to open up for this fan art contest that's been ongoing right now. The costume contest, which is
it's about to start.
Yeah, it's October. It's October now. Hangout sessions with us monthly. We had a really big hangout session recently, where
2 Fridays ago
we had the Media MD guys, we had the Do the Right Thing guys, and we had Michael, all hanging out, having a big debate about important topics. We solved all the world's problems actually in that conversation. And in order to hear that conversation, we just need a $5 donation. So,
and I couldn't attend that one either, but I did listen to some of this talk about anime, and wrong.
Well, next time maybe
That's all I'll say.
You can say your piece, but right now you didn't get to. So, and of course, while you're over there on Patreon, make sure you donate to Wildbow at patreon.com/Wildbow. This is his world. This is his crystal red landscape. We are just trapped in it like echoes.
At least we'll wake up soon.
Yeah, will we? So yeah, we've got a bunch of new members of the Doof community this week. We've got Bidoofs, Cecilia H, Elize 295, Bruce A, and Brady D. We've got new Doof dancers: Kyrgyzstan, Sophia, Eric, Tim the Enchanter, Ryan Richardson. We've got Doof Troop members Mike, Steven Z, and Koalas DLT. And new Supreme Leader Doof Daniel K. Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We asked you guys if you could get us over the hump of our next goal while I was away, and God, you did it a lot. Wow, Thank you so much. We definitely hit our goal. So we didn't announce this at the beginning, but we'll announce it right here. Our podcast, diving deep into Stephen King's The Dark Tower, is going to happen. We are doing that now. That show is in, I'll generously call it in pre-production.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of stuff I have to do behind the scenes. Basically, I have to reread all the books too, just to make sure so I can guide Matt through them expertly. I think I'm just going to reread them one at a time, though.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to reread the first one, and then you and I are going to start with it. So we are going to start that up as soon as possible. It is going to be a little bit of a wait as we do stuff behind the scenes and find a way to have time to record that every week, but it is happening for sure now. We've hit the goal. It is happening for sure. So if you guys want to hear about news on that, when that's starting, what's going down, you can follow us on Twitter, like we said. Subscribe to any of our podcasts. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we release it. Subscribe to us on YouTube so you can see it there. That's the way. The as of yet unnamed Dark Tower podcast happening. Very excited about that. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, I can't wait to be the Scott for once.
Yeah, and I'm going to be the Matt. And everyone's going to be like, whoa, look at Matt. It's Scott. I almost called myself Matt. Look at Scott keeping that straight face as Matt makes predictions. Whoa.
And I'm going to be so good at making predictions because that's how this is. That's just natural. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool.
All right, good. So thank you so much for all of you that made that happen. Each and every one of you. Y'all are amazing. And of course, if you can't afford to donate right now, you guys are still amazing too. There are tons of ways you amazing people can help us out. You can head on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leave us a rating and a review. You can share the podcast. There's tons of different things you can do to help us out, and we appreciate all you do. I mean, just downloading and listening is helping us out. So we thank you guys for doing that.
It's true, yeah. So yeah, thanks. That's all we got for you on the show this week. Next week, we'll be back with part 2 of the Amy Sucks tour, as well as 2 chapters, maybe of the next arc. Wow.
What's the name going to be?
Light.
It's great. Yes.
Shiny.